Okay, Gloria, all set.
Hey, good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome to the regular Board of Education meeting scheduled for February 22nd, 2021. We'll start with our recitation of our vision statement, where every school will be a thriving school that prepares every student to graduate from high school, college, career, and community ready. We had a few written registrations. Brief summary here. There were 12 written registrations submitted from noon on Friday, February 19th until 3 p.m. on Monday, February 22nd. There were 2 in support of delaying reopening until all teachers who are required to be in the building are fully vaccinated. 10 were opposed to inequitable fundraising for extra capital improvements, and 1 in support of the recommendations from the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee. And we do have some public appearances tonight. We'll go ahead.
First speaker is Alanya Patterson.
Thank you, Barb. Alanya Patterson, hello, welcome. You can go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Sorry, just muting that so it's not echoey. Dear Dr. Jenkins, the MMSD Board of Education, and anyone else involved in decision-making in our district. My name is Alanya Patterson, and I'm not sure my voice is going to be heard. It doesn't appear to help to speak up anywhere else, so I'm taking this opportunity to speak directly to you all. I'm one of your Black educators. I've been Black and in a school system nearly my entire life. As a student, I experienced the effects of white supremacy in the system in many of the same ways I see my own students experience it. When I chose to become an educator, I did it with a clear understanding that I was going to be a teacher who was going to be someone who would be able to make a difference and build relationships with kids in a way that is unique and invaluable, being a Black female art teacher. I, like probably all of us, came into this profession with an excitement and energy that comes from the challenge and privilege of having a direct hand in shaping the future, to make a difference with kids, to be someone kids who were like me could see and relate to. My entire career, I've been here for the revolution. I participated in diversity trainings, attended countless professional developments about examining our biases and critically examining the racist fabric we are systemically woven into. I was there when you brought the powerful and revolutionary abolitionist Dr. Bettina Love to speak to and inspire us. I read your emails and I heard your calls for us all to be co-conspirators and declare ourselves as an anti-racist abolitionist establishment. And in my many years of teaching, I never fully believed any of that was ever really going to happen. I didn't think it was going to amount to more than anti-racist thoughts and prayers. I could let the pats on the back for a job well-intended slide because it would take something drastic to really allow the education system to truly reinvent itself. And then the pandemic hit, and we all got sent home. Something drastic had finally happened. And I thought, this is it. This is the moment for the revolution, to reimagine the school system, for MMSD to finally embrace their stance on being anti-racist abolitionist educators. Even with the roller coaster of the year and wavering trust between staff and administration, I've somehow managed to hold on to my optimism that at some point we'd all admit that we were in a pandemic, and while it's extremely challenging, it is also a golden opportunity. But not anymore. I've lost that hope. I'm not sure who is pulling the strings in this sudden and ill thought out return to buildings, but I can tell you it was the catalyst for me losing my faith in MMSD and in our education system. We talk about freedom dreaming and the need to be culturally responsive, and yet we are willing to put the lives of teachers, our families, and our community on the chopping block. For what? To appease the GOP and their dangling of blood money? For being in person, to be better customer service representatives to the privileged, predominantly white voices who demand that we open our doors because their kids are falling behind? To appease the need for mental health support that we never satisfied in the before times and isn't on deck for now either? To be babysitters for the economy because our government failed us. And with education being a female dominant profession, we can be gaslit to take care of the kids so parents can work. MMSD is always saying we're committed to anti-racist teaching practices, but are we? When it really comes down to it, are we really willing to sacrifice the status quo to shift the system? Until a few weeks ago, I naively still thought that the answer might be yes. Now that I see MMSD is willing to put our lives on the line because of, I can only assume, the economy, I no longer have any faith that we are indeed committed to anti-racist practices. If our district cannot stand up to the community at large and announce that we are going to do what is truly in the best interest of, and not what is easiest for, the community by keeping us safer at home and waiting to meet our own metrics at the very least, I do not believe we will ever be willing to stand up to the white supremacist system to effect real change. If we are required to return to in-person teaching when it is clearly not safe, then I respectfully request that we no longer talk about being anti-racist abolitionist educators. Part of being anti-racist is being anti-capitalist and anti-sexist. Currently, we are putting women and children in danger for the sake of capitalism. We clearly don't have either the guts for or a true idea of what being an anti-racist establishment really takes. I really hoped we were going to be the ones who had the courage to do what is right for us, that we would be the district that would be courageous enough to lead the way. And honestly, there is still a small part of me that still hopes we are. My heart breaks for the families that will be losing much loved teachers. I am sure I am not alone in my sudden quest for a career change, as I no longer feel valued or like I can make the impact I came here to make. More so, my heart breaks for whoever was just given a death sentence. I'm sure it has weighed on you that the announcement to send us back before it is truly safe does mean that there are people in our community who will no longer be with us because of the choice MMSD has made. I hope we can find the sense to backtrack our plans until it is really safe for us all to return. And I'll leave you with this quote from Dr. Bettina Love from her article, "Teachers, we cannot go back to the way things were," and an invitation. We cannot go back. We now have the opportunity not to just reimagine schooling or try to reform injustice, but to start over. Starting over is hard, but not impossible. We now have a skeleton of a playbook. It starts with creativity, teacher-student relationships, and teacher autonomy. If being anti-racist abolitionists is what we still stand for, I invite you to use your privilege and your power to put your words into radical action, to be centered on the people who make the system function and flourish, and to take a beat to freedom dream. What if we really were anti-racist abolitionist educators? What would be possible, and what choices would we make?
Great. Thank you so much for your time this evening and your words.
The next speaker is Brenda Haskins.
Hi, I'm speaking on 14.3. I'm assuming you're going to take those at that time.
Go ahead, Brenda. You can speak now.
Okay, well, cart's a little ahead of the horse.
We can't see you, Brenda. So
I don't know why.
okay, there something just happened. Okay, it's fine.
Okay, You'd see I'm wearing my Lafollette burgundy because I'm a Lafollette parent. I'm also,
Brenda, we can't see you, so.
I don't know how to,
Okay.
There you go.
There you go. Now we can see you.
there we are. Okay. I really feel like this is out of place because I intended to speak on 14.3, but I will go ahead. I'm here to talk about equity in the district and the inequity that you guys have advanced by last month, approving memorial to do private fundraising, and then I'm anticipating you approving memorial again and West again, and letting them leapfrog ahead of the East Side schools. I'm an East graduate. I graduated in 81. I have a son who graduated last spring from Lafollette, and I have another son who's a junior. And I have fought tooth and nail for programming at Lafollette. And it took years and years and years just to get one drama class. And when I look at what the West Side schools have, it is incredibly inequitable. We have a letter from countless members of Lafollette community, parents, teachers, that is in front of you. And I will just say that I watched last month's board meeting and was incredibly disappointed with the cursory glance you all gave towards equity, and then went ahead and approved Memorial's request. It's time to treat the East Side like a complete and full partner in MMSD. I'm terribly disappointed as a lifelong Madisonian that you guys who run on equity, and then you pull this kind of stuff. So I'm done for now, but when that comes up, remember, I'm against it.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Chelsea Barnes. Chelsea, if you could turn on your mic and your video, we're ready for you to start. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh.
Good evening to, or you can't see me.
Yep, we don't see you. So if you can turn on your video if you want us to see you.
Well, it's definitely on.
Okay.
I guess I will try again. I wonder, hold on.
There's something covering your camera, just because it looks like it's on, but we're just seeing you in a dark.
There you
There we go. I don't know what it was. I'm a teacher. I swear I know what I'm doing. It didn't seem like it, but okay.
You can go ahead. And
Thank you. Good evening to the members of the school board and Dr. Jenkins. My name is Chelsea Barnes, and I am a third grade teacher at Marquette Elementary. On February 17th, our allocation for staff for the 21-22 school year was shared with us. In that meeting, we learned that we will be losing 2 of our 9 classroom teachers and potentially a CC teacher. The newly proposed 5th grade classrooms will have 27 or more students, and the newly proposed 4th grade classrooms will have 25 or more students. In my opinion, these class sizes are far too large to even be considered when returning to school in the fall during what will be a recovering but still ongoing pandemic. Students' social and emotional needs cannot be fully addressed in a class of 27. Students' learning needs cannot be efficiently met in a class of 27. Teachers cannot build truly meaningful relationships with students and families in a class of 27. It is my belief that we should prioritize maintaining current staffing to accommodate the proposed class sizes. In addition, we should also be prioritizing our wages with a cost of living increase for the 21-22 school year, in addition to the cost of living increase we have requested for the 2021 school year.
I'm speaking on behalf of myself as well as my colleagues who are devastated by the loss of these valued teachers. We have built strong relationships with each other over this time and have developed our strengths as a team. These teachers who are being surplused are absolutely necessary to the learning that needs to happen at our school. They are involved in our school community and have been since the day they joined Marquette. These teachers have become an integral part of our school community. As teachers, we're always told how important it is to build relationships with our students. I would say that it is equally important to build relationships with your colleagues. These decisions to shuffle staff are harmful to our students and school. The decision to shuffle staff is not made in the best interest of the students, but in the interest of the budget. What is most upsetting is these teachers we are losing will likely get assigned to another building, our numbers will increase in the fall, and we will have to hire teachers to fill a position that was already filled. How do we justify returning to schools in March in the interest of the children and then disrupt their adjustment by shuffling around staff and making the familiar unfamiliar? Our students need these familiar faces. These teachers offer so much to our building, both professionally and personally. This is a tremendous loss for Marquette. I would like the district and the board to truly consider what is in the students' best interest by reconsidering the budget for next year and reassigning these teachers to be kept at Marquette where they belong. The shuffling of teachers will be happening all over the district. I would encourage families to reach out to the school board and the district leadership to address this terrible plan. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chelsea.
Our next speaker is Corey Finkelmeyer.
Hey, Jack. You can go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's actually that's my son's name. I'm Corey Finkelmeyer.
I'm sorry, Corey.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. I think that's from his class this morning or from today. So
Okay.
Welcome
to the school board.
Well, thank you. So good evening, everybody. My name is Corey Finkelmeyer, and I'm here on behalf of concerned Lafollette parents and as president of the All School Booster Club. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak briefly with you tonight. As the board and administration can see, around 150 Lafollette parents signed a letter urging you to address long-term inequities in the funding that our high schools receive. You also received 50 very powerful testimonials from Lafollette parents and alumni from many different walks of life. Their stories are real, their feelings are real, their anger is real. Please listen to them. They are speaking truth, and they're speaking truth to you. But please also know this too. As a parent leader at Lafollette High School, I stand ready to work with my fellow parent leaders at all the high schools to better the lives of all of our children. And I invite the board, the administration, and all my fellow parent leaders at all the high schools to collaborate to find ways to make all our schools better and more equitable. I'm ready. Lafollette is ready. We hope you are too. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Greg Murray.
Hi, Greg. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. And I appreciate the board's time tonight. Again, so my name is Greg Murray, and I'm a Lafollette parent. And I'm going to be speaking on item 14.3 as well that Corey just referenced. and the decision to approve millions of dollars of additional amenities to just the two West Side high schools. I would note that both of my kids will be long graduated from Lafollette and the MMSD school system before these projects are completed. So I don't speak with the framework of needing something for my kids. I speak with the framework of someone who's had his kids go through the East Side high schools for many years and seen the disparities. I mean, as you all know, we're on the cusp of having just passed an incredibly important referendum to improve our schools. It passed with flying colors across the city. Part of that support was premised on the fact that all 4 major high schools would get equal funding to improve our sorely deteriorated resources. Cap High would finally get a place to call home, and we'll build a long overdue elementary school for the South Side. Bottom line, lots of support because all the kids were going to benefit. Now, immediately on the heels of that, 2 West Side schools are asking for an additional $30 million in extra amenities. And that's what the numbers are. $10 million for Memorial last month, $7 million tonight for West. Memorial's proposal has an additional totaling $20 million. And then Memorial's going to have additional stuff as well. $30 million in extra amenities through private resources to just those 2 schools. You have to approve that, and you have to approve it in compliance with your policies. And MMSD staff, Dr. Jenkins' staff, wrote a memo on this, and they appropriately pointed to your policy 6177, your policy, which asks you to consider whether donations of this size will create an significant inequity and or competitive advantage among schools, students, district programs, employees, or facilities. So considering these proposals individually and collectively for these 2 high schools, you have to ask yourself whether providing an additional $30 million in improvements to your 2 high schools that have the lowest amount of economic disparity, lowest minority enrollment, will create a significant inequity or a competitive disadvantage to Lafollette or East or your other high schools. The answer to that question should be a resounding yes. It's $30 million. Even MMSD staff in the memo that you were provided said that this was not, quote, in alignment with your donation policy or the equity vision of the district. Of course, an extra $30 creates a significant inequity to the students at Lafollette. It seems like a question that answers itself. Of course, $20 to $30 million will create a competitive disadvantage to Lafollette and the other high schools. In spite of that, the board last month unanimously approved the Memorial project and seems poised to do so for the rest of the $30 million worth of projects. You know, I asked myself, how can this be? How does this meet your policy? It's your policy. And the board's answer to that question seems to be allocating an additional $1.6 million to Lafollette. And I asked myself, 1.6 million, 30 million? How is that close? How is that equitable? I mean, let's put aside the fact that we don't even know that Lafollette's going to get that money, because that $1.6 million is premised on maybe, hopefully, if a TIF district comes in with extra money, fingers crossed, we'll give a little bit extra, some crumbs to Lafollette. That's not right. Having said that, let me be clear. Fundraising is a good thing. We all do fundraising. I've worked with Corey and Lafollette for years on fundraising. We're not talking about an extra $10,000 here for some uniforms or some signage. This is a question of scale. And again, we all know that equity doesn't mean equal, but $30 million isn't even in the ballpark. It's a question of scale, not dribs and drabs. $30 million is once in a generation money, and frankly, it's going to leave Lafollette in the dust. So if you approve these projects, if you approve these $30 million worth of projects for your 2 high schools that already have the most resources, please do not pretend that doing so advances your equity vision or meets your own equity policy goals. I mean, it just does not. And I can't find a way to explain how it does. And the the $1.6 million, maybe, hopefully, that doesn't get us there. At the end of the day, equity policies are important, but you can have all the equity policies if you want, but what really matters is outcomes. Outcomes. People would not be complaining about reading levels if we had bad policies, but great reading scores and equitable reading scores across the district. It's the outcomes that matter. If you approve this, the outcome of these decisions will be a once in a generation permanent disparity and inequity in facilities within the Madison district. That's not fair. That's not fair. And I need you all to think about that as you're approving this and reviewing this tonight. With that, I would request respectfully that you follow your own existing equity policies. I'd also ask that you meet the demands of the letter that the Lafollette parents put forth that Corey referenced, and really consider this, because this will impact and create and drive a wedge between this community. And that's just really unfortunate. We're a family. We should act like one. Finally, I'll have to end by saying the management team at Lafollette is great. We love Principal LaRosa. Thanks for hiring him. He does a fantastic job with his team over there. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Murray, for your time.
The next speaker is Heather Daniels.
And Heather, you can go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, board members and Superintendent Jenkins. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'm Heather Daniels and a parent of an MMSD student for 6 years in the Lafollette area. I'm speaking in regards to my concerns about the multi-million-dollar fundraising campaigns on the January, February, and March agendas. I'm not here to tell you to vote against the proposals. I understand the enthusiasm for the projects, and it's great to see the community support our schools. However, I want to remind the board of its policy on donations, a policy that requires the board to consider whether the donation will create a significant inequity and/or competitive advantage among schools, students, district programs, employees, or facilities. It's hard to imagine that millions of dollars more going to construction projects to certain schools would not contribute to inequities. I urge the board to have a serious discussion about this issue and find creative ways to address the disparities in fundraising potentials between our schools, elementary through high school. Frankly, it's a discussion that is long overdue. Without a resolution, you are creating a situation where one set of schools raises money to get what they want and the rest get what they are given. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Heather.
The next speaker is Jean Burns Frank. Whenever you're ready, Jean. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, student representative, Dr. Jenkins, and everyone else on the meeting tonight.
Jean, we don't see you, so if you could turn your video on.
I can. There you go. My name is Jean Burns Frank. I'm a parent of both a Lafollette junior and a recent Lafollette graduate. I'm also the VP of the Lafollette Boosters. I'm here to talk about Agenda 14.3 and actually 14.4 from the January 25th meeting and register my opposition to it. This is just not equitable. And I do want to touch on a few things. I know people have probably talked about some of the things I'm going to touch about, but Lafollette has been on the agenda as part of both of these requests, today's and last month's meeting. And to my knowledge, the boosters did not get notified of this. It's clear from listening to last month's meeting that staff in MMSD and possibly some of the board members were aware of efforts by Weston Memorial to raise substantial funds. And I do wonder if staff or board members reached out to anyone associated with Lafollette regarding these efforts. It seems like assumptions were made without talking to us directly, assumptions about both us and our students. At the last meeting, Kelly Ruppel stated that giving TID money to Lafollette was a step in the right direction, so not quite equitable. Further, how can the board be talking about projects at West and Memorial from an equity standpoint if we haven't audited or done any type of accounting at the high schools to see what is actually equitable? This shouldn't continue to happen in our district. It really just should not continue. And when a school is defined by its most connected parents and alumni, it's just not a good look. And Lafollette students already see this, and it hurts. We do have someone in the comments associated with the letter who indicated that she would help make this process more equitable, and I hope that you consider reaching out to her. Her information is there. And I also want to extend an invitation to our board rep, Ali Mudro, to come to one of our booster meetings or anyone on the board so you can see what we're all about. Thank you for your time, and L's up.
Thank you so much, Jean, for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Katie France. Hi, Katie, whenever you're ready. Thank you.
And Katie, if you could turn your camera on too, so we can see you.
Yes, here I am. Great. Hello, Dr. Jenkins and Madison School Board members. I want to thank you for your attention tonight. I'm speaking tonight in regard to agenda item 14.3. I am a Lafollette parent, and I echo the statements of Brenda Haskins, Corey Finkelmeyer, Greg Murray, Heather Daniels, Jean Burns-Frank, and others that are sure to come tonight, and they are all far more articulate than I. I was going to reference policy 6177, the board's policy on accepting large donations based on understanding equity principles and making sure not to create a competitive advantage for some schools. That's been done. I support fundraising for the high schools, but I believe that any funds raised in connection with the referenda must be distributed equitably across the high schools. Doing anything else will only exacerbate the existing inequities. Madison's high schools are quite frankly known for institutional and systemic racism, both in inputs, considering the populations that they serve by the different high schools, and by the outcomes in terms of achievement and opportunity gaps. We must work to reverse this. It is our duty. This is our opportunity. It is now or never, or maybe it's now or in another 40 or 50 years when they pass another giant referendum. I urge you to make funding, equity in funding, a top priority, the type of priority that we all understand it must be. These words should sound familiar. Board President Reyes has said, "My whole purpose is to lift up others, to do my part to give voice to those voices who may not always be heard." Pulled from the Facebook page. Board member Muldrow has said, "We are a community that prides ourselves on our progress. We are not a district to be defined by our past. We will address racial disparities relentlessly until our schools are places where students of color are recognized, valued, and provided with meaningful opportunities for success and inclusion." From her Facebook page. Member Carusi has said that she would bring all voices to the table to ensure that all children in our community go to vibrant public schools. She has said our children and teachers should not depend on business partnerships, philanthropy, and PTO fundraisers for equipment and supplies, field trips, technology, and other needs. The current trend of closing budget gaps with referendums is unsustainable and aggravates inequality. And that was from the Progressive Dane questionnaire. Member Vandermeulen has said on her website, said that Nikki does make it a mission in life to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. I know I only have limited time. I've got more quotes. I want to end on Lafollette and East simply require more funding than West and Memorial do if we are to truly be aiming for equity and opportunities for all students across the district. The large donations being sought by Memorial and West will only exacerbate the already present and prevalent inequities. Lafollette and East, just by the sheer numbers, have more students of color more economically disadvantaged students and more English language learners than the Memorial and West High Schools, despite having far fewer students. We have more, not percentages. I mean, we have way more percentages, but literally more. I think that these donations are grossly inequitable. Having watched the last school board meeting, I was infuriated that they're even being considered without any real discussion of what would be needed to bring those opportunities to Lafollette and East students. The students who, students in our schools are home with sometimes taking care of younger siblings. They have parents who are working more than one job to make ends meet. Sometimes they're translators for their non-English speaking family as they try to access healthcare. Sometimes they're working jobs to pay their family's bills, and it's unacceptable that the district accepts $30 million on behalf of in donations for two relatively well-off schools and throws maybe $1.6 million in the future to Lafollette. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Katie.
Our next speaker is Melissa Marcourt.
Hi, how are you? Good evening.
Good evening.
Dear Dr. Jenkins and all members of the board, thanks for listening this evening. My name is Melissa Marcourt, and I'm an East Side parent, and I'm also here to talk tonight about item 14.3. I'd like to offer my voice as part of making sure that the East Side of Madison is viewed, understood, and heard. I live in the Grandview Commons neighborhood, and my children go to the Elvium Elementary School. I've been watching many families over the past years consistently leave the East Side of Madison because they believe Lafollette is the worst school that the Madison district has to offer. They can afford to leave, so they do. How sad is that? I want my voice to be heard so that we can start to make the right choices and stop repeating the issues that we've been repeating over the past. Accepting this proposal from the West furthers the inequalities that continue to be present for the East Side of Madison. It's time to make the right choices and again, stop repeating these mistakes. The East Side of Madison can't fund like we are seeing West Memorial do. And they're going to get these incredible upgrades, and I'm so excited for them to be getting them. But we need to find a way, and the board needs to make sure that they are considering a way to make this funding equitable and offering a maybe someday Lafollette will be granted some TID money is not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Our final speaker is Sarah Lazenby. Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Hi. Hi, I'm Sarah Lazenby. I am an MMSD grad. I attended Hawthorne, Whitehorse, and Lafollette. I have a student who is a current 7th grader at Whitehorse Middle School. And I just wanted to speak to 14.3 and the larger issue of private fundraising attached to the referendum that has been passed. Lafollette has always been viewed as less than in this district. The students know it. I knew it when I was a student. You know, the students nowadays know that too, and it's always had inequities in it. I owe my success to the dedicated staff that I encountered at Lafollette, people like Sue Root or Ted Widerski, but the inequities challenge that experience all the way through. There are differences in curricular offerings. There are differences in co-curricular offerings. There are differences in PTO fundraising across all levels of the schools from the East Side to the West Side. You know, there are obvious capital differences. This referendum was meant to be different. it was not equitable, but it was at least equal, that each of the 4 high schools were going to get similar upgrades that are all past due and necessary. And the idea that private parent groups come in and are able to assemble professional fundraisers, have prospects for who their large donors will be in this short time period, that they can then take advantage of cost savings that exist from attaching these projects to the existing referendum, cost savings from architects or contractors. It speaks to their privilege, and it's a shame that that opportunity is not offered to all students, right? Even if Lafollette was able to successfully fundraise on a different timeline, they'd have to fundraise that much more because they're not able to quickly mobilize to attach to this referendum and this building improvement project. You know, it goes against the spirit of the referendum that was passed, that was developed by you all as board members, that was approved by taxpayers, and it goes against your board policy. And a small amount of TID funding split across several schools in response to that doesn't fix those inequities that exist. And so I'm left to think, if not this board, who will do something differently? Who will say finally that no, all of our high schools, all of our schools in the district, quite frankly, deserve equal resources and funding? Who will? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. All
That
right,
was our final speaker. Thank you.
okay, great. Thank you, Barb. Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of minutes.
Chair,
I'm sorry, somebody say something?
may I make a motion to bring something out of order, being that we have all the Lafollette parents watching currently, that could we bring that up first, or would you rather take them in order?
I would rather take them in order. We don't have a lot before.
Okay. That's great. I just was trying to figure out how the most equitable way to do it, and I don't know.
I wonder if we can move it before the consent agenda.
I think that would work.
Okay, so we have a motion by Nikki to move up
Second.
14.3, Savian second. Any discussion? And we'll move it before we get to the consent agenda. Okay, all
I
those in
appreciate
favor,
that.
Julia, your advisory vote?
Aye.
Okay, all those in favor, aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, let's get through. Thank you, Nikki, for bringing that up.
No problem.
So motion to approve minutes. I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the regular meeting dated October 26, 2020. Can I get a second?
Second, Nikki.
Nikki, second. Any discussion? Okay, Julia, your advisory vote?
Aye.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0. We got a few announcements here. Parents of Black Excellence build community at Chavez Elementary School. This is really exciting. The past month, 2 parents with students attending Chavez Elementary, Desiree Mayo and April Kingea, had connected and discussed how to bring Black families together in an effort to make Chavez Elementary a more welcoming environment for their children and other students of color facing challenges relating to race and diversity. In this effort to unite Black families, the 2 parents work closely with school staff to organize a parent group dedicated to celebrating Black culture and uplifting Black scholars. The newly organized group, Parents of Black Excellence, is the first ever Black parent affinity group at Chavez Elementary School. The board recognizes and greatly appreciates the work of both parents, Desiree Mayo and April Kingea, and their commitment to fostering equitable environments for all Black students and families at Chavez Elementary School. Thank you and congratulations. MMSD's Family and Youth and Community Engagement Department successfully host annual Read Your Heart Out event for National African American Parent Involvement Day. MMSD's Family, Youth and Community Engagement Department has successful in virtual hosting the annual Read Your Heart Out event in the first week of February. This event is hosted annually to honor and celebrate Black History Month and National African American Parent Involvement Day, which has been celebrated on the second Monday of February since 1995. Throughout the month of February, schools across MMSD have been participating in the celebration of National African American Parent Involvement Day. This year's Read Your Heart Out celebration was successful in inviting several families and community members to virtually read books, recite poetry, and connect with students through storytelling. The board recognizes and thanks the several family, youth, community engagement coordinators, the entire team, and the community member volunteers that made another Read Your Heart Out event successful once again. Thank you. Those were the announcements. And I will pass it over to Superintendent for his announcement and reports. Dr. Jenkins?
You're on mute.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Chair Reyes. Let me just say thank you to all the families, all of the speakers tonight, first of all, and we do hear you. And it's really challenging at times, and but we need to hear the voices, and it just makes us all better, really does. And so that leads right into even the school reopening, just trying to give you an update in terms of where we are, because we continue to receive the emails, and just really and truly those emails help us even be better. There are some for reopening schools. There are some for keeping our schools closed. We're going to continue to focus on the science behind in our own metrics and dashboards that's guided by our medical advisors and our internal and external teams. We've tried to reach out and to hear more and more from our families. We've spent time in the community just listening still as we're going through this process. We're trying to listen to our staff as well. We received a letter from even our MTI union that we're responding to all the questions that they've had. But if you go to our website too, you'll see a lot of the responses about our phased in plan. I'm telling you, a lot of energy is picking up as I've gone around to the schools. I was out today, and I'm just telling you, the staff there, it was just really amazing to see the energy and to see all the things that we have done. We still have questions, and we're here to answer them. But I just wanted to kind of give you an update in terms of how things are going right now with the mini app that we put out in terms of asking families to indicate whether or not that they would actually come back to school. And we wanted to look at everything 4K through 5, and we have some preliminary data that I would like to share with you right now from our 4K to 5. 65%, which is like 7,790 of our families have responded to this mini app, and 65% of that, 5,187 of those families who have responded will be returning in person. And this is just a choice. We want to be able to give our families choices if they wanted to remain virtual, if they wanted to come back for a very, to the best of our abilities, safe return to our schools. And we have done everything in terms of our facilities to make sure that the mitigating strategies are there. And we're talking to our staff. We're going to continue to do all the PD around that, as has been recommended to do so. And of the kindergartens directly, 76% of the families have responded. 67%, 956 of the families who have responded will be returning in person. At least they've indicated it at this particular point. And then we looked at just our first 4K first through fifth. In 4K, 70%, which is like 628, have responded. And then 59% of them, 374 of the respondents, will be returning in person. And on average, I won't go through each one, but for the most part, it look like we're going to have a number of families who are interested in returning. But I cannot share this data without also addressing the fact that we do see it right within the ones who are saying they're going to return to school. But we see disparities between the various races, and I would be remiss if I did not say the comments of Ms. Patterson. It's weighing heavy with the number of people, but then we also have other individuals who are having other thoughts and of various races who are also seeing the need to have their children in person, and it's a choice. They can keep them virtual or they could return. But we know that we're also up against facing the socio-emotional, the mental health needs of our children. And right now, according to CDC, the Center for Disease and Control, that our children can return to school. The National Teachers Association, if the proper mitigation has taken place. And I have to say, we have been going above and beyond, trying to be as transparent as possible. I encourage the individuals who are writing us, keep writing us. I spend days along with our staff responding to individuals with their questions, and we're going to continue to work together. We had a fabulous meeting today with our MTI partners. We meet with our administrators, and we're going to have to work through this together to get our children in the best position and our staff in the best position, but it can be safe first. And this is all based upon what the science is indicating. But I want to assure everyone that even though we're excited about the class of 21 kindergartners coming back, we want to make sure that it's a safe return based on the indicators of the science, the metrics, and the medical advisors that we have, and the things that we're looking at here in Dane County. We're very excited in the buildings today. They were just fabulous going in, and the energy that I received when I went out and talked to the staff. Everyone is taking this very serious. This is a matter of life and death. There's no way that we're taking this lightly, but we also want to highlight the fact that we have some very positive things happening too with our virtual learning. We're going to continue to try to refine that as we have gone through, and it's much better than what it was, and our teachers are doing a fabulous job, and we cannot do that without them or our custodians or our assistants in the building. And thank you, hats off to our special ed teachers and our MSCR staff as they're doing a fabulous job. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for that update. Next, report on items that proceeded through the instructional work group held on February 1st, 2021. Ananda?
Thank you so much, Board President Reyes. Last month, we, as always, we have discussed the reopening schools and received an update. The focus of that update included a conversation with our athletics director, and the board members had an opportunity to ask further questions, and we were able to receive an update on how sports are being rolled out for the school for the schools this semester. We also had an opportunity to review an updated version of the behavior education plan. And for our next instruction work group, we will continue to have both an update, and of course it's going to be March, which is the date that a lot of folks are talking about and we are anticipating to see happening. So our next meeting is going to be March 1st. So it's going to be really timely around the reopening schools. And we also, our staff is also beginning to do a lot of planning around the summer school instruction. We received a little bit of updates last month on that. We'll have an opportunity to discuss that further. And as it was in our previous scheduled time, we will also be discussing opportunity youth and the our metrics around that, and then our programming around that. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ananda. Next, report on items that proceeded through the operations work group held on February 8th, 2021. Chris?
Thank you, Gloria. We had or discussed 3 agenda items on February 8th. We had a discussion about the budget focused on staffing and workbooks and also projections for summer school. We got an update on community input regarding the building referendums or building referendum and different projects at different schools. And finally, we got a brief update on the employee handbook. The only action item amongst those 3 was the employee handbook, which we will be voting on one item tonight. Our next meeting is March 8th, and we will be discussing the budget again with a focus on healthcare benefits, priority actions, early budget approvals, and summer school. And then we will be having a more in-depth discussion about layoff and surplus language in the employee handbook. And we will be meeting in person. There will be instructions about how to engage with us in our new meeting format. So stay tuned.
Great, thank you, Chris. And item 8.1, there was no action items in the instruction work group. And 9.1, proposed revision to employee handbook. Action item. I move that the Board of Education approve the proposed changes to the employee handbook as set forth in the document prepared for the regular meeting dated February 11th, 2021 and effective immediately.
Second, Nikki.
Nikki, second. Any discussion? Okay, Julia, your advisory vote?
Aye.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Show of hands. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0. Okay, before we move on to the consent agenda, we will start with 14.3 West Fundraising Project Plan. Looks like we have 2 motions. And I do just want to open it up for discussion briefly. And I just want to thank our Lafollette High School parents and families who came in to express their concerns. They were spot on in really challenging us around equity. I think that's very important. Sometimes we do get in the midst of our work, and really it's helpful to have a reminder from people to just take a step back and have a conversation and a thoughtful discussion around equity. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Kelly to explain, and then Nikki we'll have a board discussion.
Okay. Hi, Gloria. Thank you very much. Kelly Ruppel, Chief Financial Officer. And with me tonight is the West High School fundraising team led by Karen Baran, the principal of West High School. So I'm going to hand this over to Karen in just a minute. But to kind of continue with Gloria's opening remarks, want to make sure the board and the public understand that West High School has a proposal for 5 projects as part of their overall fundraising plan. They will be discussing all 5 projects together this evening, but only 2 of those projects are we asking for your vote on tonight. And that is because those 2 projects are furthest along. We know the feasibility of these projects, and if approved tonight, we can get moving on them. The other 3 projects, we would look to bring to the board in March after the architects have had a chance to determine their overall feasibility. There are projects that are more complicated in nature, would require more city approval process. And so we don't want to bring it forward till we know that they're actually feasible projects through the city and the planning process. So just want to make sure everyone is aware why we're separating the 2. So 2 for tonight and then potential for 3 coming in March, pending the board's decision on posting those items. Understanding that there is a memo attached to this document, which has already been referenced tonight as it relates to policy 6177. We have already in the February board meeting discussed the first particular piece of that policy, which is ensuring that the overall district doesn't take on any financial risks or liabilities attached to these projects. We rectified that in our February discussions through memorial by ultimately the motion reading such that the board would not approve any pledges that were not otherwise backed and secured by a third party, and that we adhere that these projects kind of abide by a strict fundraising plan and timeline, both of which West fully understands and has built into their overall plan. So I do think that particular conversation from February has been had and is embedded into the West plan in front of you this evening. As it relates to the other item that we discussed in February, which is the $5 million, do want a chance to put a little clarity out there tonight for you. The board approved setting aside $5 million for the other referendum projects in February. It's not a maybe, and it's not an if then. The board approved funding $5 million, of which we will set aside. So that has been decided through the February board meeting as a decision the board has made that will be embedded into the budget, irregardless of the TID closure, of which we do know will provide for the $5 million excess. So I just want to clear up that particular item. And then I will hand this over to Karen Baran to open us up to summarize the West High School plan. And Karen, I think the board might want to move to discussion probably sooner rather than later. So if you just want to summarize the overall plan for us, and then Gloria will let you kind of open it up for discussion after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Good evening, President Reyes, board members, Dr. Jenkins, and members of the Madison community. Again, I'm Karen Baran. I'm the proud principal of West High School, and I want to introduce the members of the West Capital Campaign Committee that are here with us this evening. Speaking on behalf of the proposal will be, in addition to myself, will be Alicia Pelton, West Athletic Director, and Janet Dyer, Executive Director of MSCR. To answer questions from the board, we have David Maravilla, West class of 2018, who was in athletics and art and everything. And we also have Tia Byrne, West class of 2023, who's in One West Student Council, and again, in everything. We also have Dan Mansour, class of 1975 West, who I assume was in everything too, who will speak on behalf of the fundraising plan. As a principal of West, I am here today to help you understand why it matters so much that you approve the West Capital Campaign Committee's proposal to increase collaboration, design, and athletic instructional spaces for the benefit of all West students, their families, and the families and students in our entire feeder pattern that look to us to be the anchor for the community. They see West as the anchor because the storied high school has been just that for generations of West students and their families. 29,000 region alumni have walked our hallways, built shared memories, made lifelong friendships, and learned the skills that help them transition to post-secondary success. I was a veteran principal, but new to West when I first came here in July of 2017, when I got my first phone call ever. It was from a parent who was very upset about West parking. We had 125 new students that fall, and I was suddenly faced with this amazing school that was bursting at the seams. I needed to find 4 classrooms and 6 offices. The hallways were packed. The facilities were outdated. Kids were sitting deep in all 3 floors of Ash hallways eating lunch, and we had the oldest, saddest pool I had ever seen. But smart school leaders take the long haul. I knew that an opportunity would come to address these needs, and I knew the people of Madison would see this too. The West Capital Campaign Committee comes to the Board of Education tonight for your approval to take advantage of the opportunity the recently approved high school capital referendum highlighted, that the people of Madison knew their high school facilities needed a major reinvestment, and they pledged $317 million to do so. West teams of teachers, students, and staff have been deeply involved with our architects, Epstein Ewan, who have been thoughtful and responsive to our questions and our imagining. We see these designs evolve weekly, and we want you to know and appreciate how excited West is to see the new school emerge from these designs. But while they are amazing, they do not address the needs to upgrade the courtyard and provide much needed additional collaboration, eating, design, and physical education instructional spaces. In conjunction with our architects, we found the space for the new performing arts classroom and design studio. But we lack the budget to provide the equipment to access 21st century technology and skills for our current and future performing arts students, as our students articulated so clearly in the plan we presented earlier today. And when we think about equity, we have to consider the exceptional burden the lack of parking places on West staff and families. The current referendum calls for a possible gain of 14 spaces. Thank you. Thank you. In the proposed Van Nuys parking lot, but we have 220 employees. They daily gamble that there is parking in the lot, which means they had to come before 7:15, which is an hour early, a full hour before school starts, or they are taking their chances with the Regent neighborhood's 2-hour parking rules, or they are adding precious minutes to their commutes to walk the extra blocks to school. And this is daily. Families tell us they like virtual meetings because they are not required to park at West. This is not the warm, welcoming anchor we hope to provide Regent families who do not live within walking distance of the school. I will come back to complete our presentation, but now I'm honored to introduce Alicia Pelton, West's Outstanding Athletic Director, and Alicia will talk about the equity of gender and opportunity with respect to our proposed expanded athletic instructional, competitive, and recreational spaces. Alicia?
Thanks, Karen. I'm really excited to be here and share my experience and knowledge with the board on exploring the potential to offer these new opportunities that enrich the community. I believe you have some information about the project and how it will serve the community, so I'm not really going to go over those numbers that we gave you, but I will share some of my experiences both as a parent and an athletic director on the importance of creating more usable space for athletics and gatherings that will not only build community, but remove some obstacles to offer more equitable opportunities for the currently underserved students and families. So just a little background, before I became famous for being the 9th athletic director in 4 years, I spent 30 years in youth sports in every position possible: boards, educator, coach, athlete, owner. The last 8 years have been really focused on my passion for youth sports equity and as a parent of 2 MMSD high school student athletes who went through Memorial. Athletics is a great way to build community, and strong, nurturing communities help children thrive and succeed. By creating spaces like field houses, gathering places, and aquatic centers where all the members of the community can mix naturally and get to know one another as human beings, communities become communities in the true meaning of the word. Currently, West is the only MMSD school that lacks these spaces. As Dr. Brand mentioned, these new facilities we are considering will finally be an anchor to our community. I witnessed this firsthand at Memorial. I wasn't really familiar with West before becoming an AD, but Memorial I knew really well because my kids became part of that community when they were young. They attended swim lessons and sports camps, and they even got to watch me play recreational volleyball in the field house. So during their high school years, I spent a lot of time in that field house myself and outside on those green spaces. But I remember particularly one day where I was walking through Memorial to go to my daughter's volleyball game, and I had to park in the front of the building because the back parking lot for athletics was full. And as I was walking through, there was a bustling of students, and I walked through the common areas and it was packed with kids on all sorts of activities. And I watched kids running out to the field, probably late for their practice because they were meeting with their teachers. And as I walked towards the field house down the long hall, there were a lot of families with little kids coming in for swim lessons. And of course they were lost, as everybody is in Memorial. And the student athletes and the students of Memorial were helping direct those families. I could hear the large number of athletes that were in the athletic training room down the hall. They were getting taped and iced. And I even witnessed a bunch of Memorial teachers heading out to coach their teams. When I entered the field house, every court was full, including courts for school recreational activities. A bunch of my daughter's friends popped in, they watched their team play, and then they headed to another court. There was this constant interaction, and it was a beautiful sign and sight to watch as the community naturally mixed. I am guessing that East and Lafollette communities have similar experiences with their common areas and field houses. To have the benefit of community naturally mixed, the key is creating that space. And that space, or lack of, can be the difference maker for certain demographics. And that's what I'm witnessing at West. We all know, and MMSD has done their own research, that athletic participation is a huge positive impact on academic and life success. And we have shared some of those eye-opening statistics of athletic participation at West in our materials, like how our participants do not currently represent the diversity of West. And it's noted that diversity is much stronger, though, in MSCR after-school sports participation, where half the student athletes are people of color. But only 10% of after-school participation comes from West. The other 90% comes from Lafollette, Memorial, and East. Why? It's because West currently doesn't have space to offer recreational sports, so our students must practice and play somewhere else. For instance, boys basketball practices at Hoyt, and then they play on the weekends at either West or either Lafollette, East, or Memorial's field houses. So what does that become? West has one boys basketball team compared to the other schools who average 5 to 7 basketball teams. And that's just one sport. Recreational athletics can benefit more cultural equity too. And that was brought to my attention after spending a week in Minneapolis and St. Paul recently, discussing their facilities and offerings because they're very similar to us. Their demographics were changing, much like ours. So they decided to offer badminton for girls because that sport was strong in a certain culture. One school alone had 70 girls participating, and research shows that girls of color benefit the most from high school sports. By having a field house, we have the opportunity to add recreational sports. There are a lot of obstacles in the way for certain demographics to participate at West versus the other high schools. And these new spaces like a field house, parking, and a common area can help open opportunities and anchor this community. Students who might work or take care of young siblings at night while a parent works can now participate in activities that are now offered after school. Students who lack transportation can stay at school and participate versus trying to figure out how to get home or home from another location. Or if their practice is later, they have a place to wait in the common areas. Students can meet with their teachers after school and run into a practice late instead of having to miss their ride or their bus, which means that they have to miss their practice. And if they need to see an athletic trainer for an injury or concern, they now can before or during practice, a privilege not many West student athletes have. And students and community members will be able to support and cheer on their friends and peers like they did for my daughter. And really importantly is teachers. Teachers might be more willing to coach more activities now that they won't have to pack up and leave right after school to get to another location with equipment in the back of their car if they can even find a parking spot that day. I mean, currently all of my coaches who teach are coaches on sports that are held on site. So athletics is a great way to build community, but we have to build these spaces to offer the opportunities for all. And to become the anchor for the community, these spaces will need to be used by more than just athletics and physical education. So I would like to now introduce MSCR Executive Director Janet Dreyer. Janet will speak about MSCR's role in these plans and the benefits that go far beyond Regent students and families, but expand across families in the entire Madison.
Thank you, Alicia. President Reyes, board members, and Dr. Jenkins, I appreciate the opportunity to share with you how the plans presented in the West High School capital campaign would not only benefit West High School students, but the community at large. In particular, I'd like to focus on athletic courts and the new pool. As you all know, MSCR is the public recreation department for the entire community. We run school-based programs for students, including intramural athletics, as well as community recreation program for infants through individuals 99 years and older. As was previously shared, West High School students lack the same opportunity as students from the other comprehensive high schools to host MSCR extramural sports events or to even practice at their own school. The number of West High School students participating in MSCR after school continues to decline. And as Alicia said, only 10% of all of those participating in our after-school sports programs are West High School students. The lack of sufficient court space at West impacts access by MSCR at other schools as well, as West High athletic teams and MSCR extramural teams practice and or play at other West Side schools like Hamilton, Cherokee, and Hoyt. Not only are we unable to host after-school sports at West, but we're also limited in providing community recreation programs there. For instance, we offer far fewer adult sports leagues at West compared to East, Lafollette, and Memorial. Many of the adults who participate in these programs don't necessarily have children in school, and MSCR programming is the one benefit they receive from our schools. Additional court space at West would enable us to provide better opportunities for not only the West Madison community, but it will also open up opportunities at other sites, as we would have to serve fewer West Side adults and other participants in the remaining MMSD schools. I'm also really excited to share how the proposed pool at West will benefit the community. MSCR is only able to offer 2 seasons of swimming lessons at West High School because there isn't access to the pool from the locker rooms. So in the winter, where we have lessons at East, Lafollette, and Memorial, we're unable to have lessons for the community at West High School because that outside entrance goes directly to the pool, and that just isn't safe. Finally, the prospect of a warm water pool at West High School will enable us to serve nearly 400 community members plus more who are on our wait list for programs at the Lapham Warm Water Pool. Those programs include water walking for individuals with disabilities, aqua exercise for older adults, and infant and preschool swimming lessons. Before I turn things back over to Principal Baran, I want to share that MSCR has and will continue to work with school leadership and athletic directors to ensure fair access to these facilities for all Madison residents, including students, infants, and adults of all ages. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. My friends, West is landlocked and overcrowded. We are excited to learn that our friends and neighbors in other schools are interested in these projects. We know, they know, West is landlocked and overcrowded because who among us has tried and failed to park at West? They know we are overcrowded and of our desperate need for additional 21st century instructional, collaborative, and athletic spaces for our current and future students. They know we lack the athletic facilities that their children enjoy. They know, we believe that they know we lack the 21st century video and technology facilities that the other comprehensive high schools have. We believe that they will come to see this and the capital fundraising appeals of other schools as an opportunity to explore public-private partnerships, to join with us and learn with us, just as we are learning from our friends at Memorial, so that as a city, we can rise to meet the changing needs of future Lancer, Pergolders, Spartans, as well as regions. Thank you for your time and your consideration, and will now happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Karen, Janet, David, Dan, and Tia for being here, and Kelly, and Alicia. So what we'll do is, how we'll frame this conversation is I want us to, board members to focus on any questions that you have, in particular with West High School. And then I want to separate our conversation around equity. Okay, and so since we have our fabulous staff here, And students, if you have any questions, particularly to the West High School development. Questions, comments, Ali?
Yeah, what makes the two projects you're bringing forward for a vote this evening more prepared than the other three projects you're planning to bring to us later in March, so next month?
Thank you, Ali, for asking that. We have had the opportunity to work with our architects and our construction companies to get well crafted estimates as to what the projects are, that they are feasible. They are within the house. They don't require city approval. And that is why we are bringing those projects forward today, because we have the most solid designs and the best understanding.
What's the total value of the two projects you're bringing forward this evening?
It's in board docs.
It's 5 million plus 1.5.
Yep.
Dan, help me out here. I knew it yesterday.
5.5 for the atrium, 1.5 for
Thank you.
the digital design studio.
And so that includes things like the consultant or funds that would go to FMPS, not just the projects themselves. The projects themselves, I believe, came in about 4.5 for the atrium and closer to 1 million for the digital studio.
Thank you, Kelly.
That's all of my questions. Thank you so much for speaking to those.
Great, thank you. Christina, and then Savion.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for your enthusiasm around these projects. My questions relate to having 5 projects coming before us, and kind of what Ali was getting to, having these come in 2 separate chunks is a little challenging. If you had all the information and we're looking at these projects together, out of the 5, how would you prioritize which ones do you think are most important for the West community? If you're really only able to do 2 or 3 of them? And how would you decide that?
Who wants to answer that?
I think I'm going to start, and then I want my friends to jump in. Christina, these are coming before you because it was the easiest for the architects and the construction consultants to wrap their brains around them, because these were ideas that they had done in other schools. And so I have to say, from the simplicity of the projects, the 2 that you have before you today, while not small, are far less complicated than the others because of the difference in water and access and city and all that. I want to say that all the projects are important, and that at this moment, as a team, we have not said, if we don't have this, then we'll do this. Because right now we're all in, and we have to be all in just to see what's possible. I think that's my best answer. Who'd like to improve on that?
I can add a little bit about like the field house and pools. We are, just because of structurally how that looks and what the cost might run to, we are looking at plans A, B, and C. And we're working with the architects to look at plans A, B, and C. So when it actually comes to the table, we'll know. And then when the money is raised, we'll be able to say plan A, B, or C. Because that is an issue. We don't know how much it is. So we're looking feasibility wise right away. What can be built? What will the city approve? And then how can we, if we fundraise, and where are we? What will work best for us?
Thanks for speaking to that. Oh, David, did you have something you were going to add?
Yeah, I can add something. I'll try and be brief. When I was invited to participate in this West campaign, obviously I'm a recent grad, 2018, but I have hopefully future regents in my life. I have friends in high school, Terrence McNeil Jr., fellow linebacker, Sidney Thomas, who had kids towards the end of their high school career, and Sidney Thomas in 2019. They are raising, hopefully, future regents, at least we're pushing them to be. I think these projects are all of equal importance because I want these future regents to have an appropriate place to eat lunch, access to a field house, MSCR, a pool. Their guardians should be able to park to support them if they are the athletes like their fathers. That's why I believe these projects are of equal importance.
Thank you. Christina, do you have further questions?
Yeah, I had a question, and maybe Chad is the most appropriate person to answer this, but based on what we know of the referendum projects that we already have, the 70 million we're already investing, are there any of these that, like when we're talking about footprint in the school, that like you don't need to make, like you could eventually come back to them or add them on? I mean, obviously expanding a pool in the middle of the school is not possible, but are there any of these that, you know, you could play with the timeline a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's been part of what we've been working with the EUA team on, is the feasibility of these projects maybe being staggered in terms of we go to bid with kind of the base referendum project, and then maybe add some of these after the fact. We actually initially looked at the possibility of some of this in athletics, but have found that the combination of having to potentially go 80 feet high in the air to stack some of these features, and kind of some of the structural steel that'll be necessary to set the parameters in place to do this after the fact, those aren't looking terribly promising. That's why Karen's team and Alicia are talking about plans A, B, and C. We're meeting. I think Alicia is probably almost meeting every day with a question or two around the athletics piece. So that one feels like we're going to need to know by the time we get to March, because we have to have the bid set to go. So they're nice and clean when we get to bid day about a year from now. So we don't confuse the general contractors to the point that we skew the rest of the bid results. Some of the other things might be possible to go a little later. The atrium might be one of those, and that would come out of the feasibility study. And I think the parking, if there's some type of structured parking that comes along with this, as long as we don't bury it underneath the pool when we have to build it, may be able to come at a different time. And that's part of the reason we've engaged EUA right away. The second we knew West was interested in this, that we wanted to make sure we knew what needed to be ready when we got to bid day, and what possibly could be, 5 years from now, we finally raised the funds after board approval to tack onto these already really good projects.
Yeah, Christina, can I just say one thing is we have, the structure, the base structure is basically, we have one opportunity to do that on the field house and like the sports. It looks to be, it might be really hard to add on to that. And we just don't have space because we're landlocked. So by engaging, like Chad's saying, engaging those architects right away, that's what we're exploring. Is there a possibility to set the ground and know what we can build after that? But it's so important right now. And that's why we're kind of waiting that month to make sure we got it all squared away.
Thanks for addressing that. And I do appreciate the opening up community access, with additional space for recreation. And so I hear you on that regard. Yeah, thanks for all the information.
Great, thank you. Christina Savion.
Thank you, Gloria. Where is the West community at in terms of their referendum input sessions? And how those funds are dispersed?
Yeah, could you answer that?
Yeah, so I think I'd kind of consider that twofold. We've met with the Hoyt community and the Capitol High community a couple times. So I think there's pieces of that there. We had one large input session now a few weeks back with the West community at large. And we are engaging with the West High School staff and students nonstop. So I had an email flurry today with Melanie Thiel getting another round of input sessions set up there. So Savian, we've met a number of times with the West community already. Certainly, if we felt we needed to go back, we could. And yes, what happens with these plans is as we get more and more locked into where things are going, then the plans actually get a little more technical, where we bring in engineers to start to figure out where outlets go, how high lab tables are, and how you're going to modify the heating and cooling system for the programming that's happened over the last 3 or 4 months with the West community.
Thank you for that, and definitely understand the logistical problems with that. So I understand that we did many referendum outreach sessions prior to passing the referendum. Given how important the speakers tonight talked about how important these projects are, why didn't we fit them in with our approved referendum?
Some of them are started. So there is a new pool in the new referendum. We were able to find a design studio space and a classroom. What we lacked was the funding for a design studio. So there are, when we think about our proposals, we are also building on what is already in the referendum for those spaces. We knew the referendum could not go far enough to meet the need. We knew that at the time.
So, and Savian, certainly a good question. You're never going to hit and kind of the input process and master planning exercise to push all the buttons in terms of what everyone wants. We held 50 input sessions on the front end and engaged in this in probably a much longer time period than would be typical, and felt pretty good about where the master plans were at. To Karen's point, West is getting a brand new pool and will have the nicest pool in our district. That being said, they will not have 2 pools, but we don't have any other high schools with 2 pools. So if that's part of what this project and the West community needs, and we can raise funds for it after the fact, I think that's why West is here tonight. And they will be getting in the base project, we'll be replacing what were 2 small middle school basketball courts that are very hard for Alicia to schedule with 2 new high school courts. So they will be getting a nice upgrade as far as that goes. And yeah, I guess in summary, we could have spent $200 million at every one of these projects if we wanted, and raised, knocked down all 4 high schools and built them back from scratch, and continue to try to do the push and pull to make sure that we got these projects as right as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I recall us tacking on an extra few $1 million to make our school more ecologically healthy.
You're echoing.
I'm not sure if that's happening. So I guess my last question is, was there any community input in terms of how these private funds being raised should be spent?
Let me address that. Dan Mansour, I'm helping with the fundraising. Savian, can you just ask that question again? I want to make sure
Yeah, in terms of like the direction in which these private funds being raised, was there a process for community input into how these private funds being raised are being used?
The natural process is for the institution to decide what the priorities are for facilities, programs, projects, whatever the case might be. In a normal time, in a normal campaign, you'd have a feasibility opportunity to talk to alumni, parents, potential donors to gauge their interest in the project. We haven't had that. What we do have is a comprehensive campaign, and not just one campaign for athletics, and maybe a campaign for the atrium or a campaign for parking. We are counting on 2 things. One, that these projects are as compelling to our alumni and to those we reach through the fundraising process as they are to all of us. And two, that the alumni will support them at the level that is necessary to accomplish our fundraising goals.
So Savion, as someone who attended all those sessions back in the pre-referendum times and knows the report on our website pretty gosh darn well, what I would say is themes that align to these projects certainly came up, including West being landlocked and needing to find as much space as physically possible. I think the atrium project aligns very well to the feedback we've received, which is to give students and staff more space within West and have places to be and places to gather, much the way the Memorial Atrium project currently has. Certainly the pool came up. I don't know that a second pool came up in the early phases, but certainly the pool came up, and certainly access to high school gyms in the field house came up as an overall kind of request as the community, and the referendum projects went as far as they could, kind of within the funding allotted, and trying to maintain the equal investment into each of the schools that the board clearly weighted on.
Anything further, Savion?
No, not at this time, although I do believe Ananda has a few questions. She's trying to reconnect to
And
the
I saw
internet.
Chris's hand too.
Okay, who had their hand up first?
Go ahead, Ananda.
No, my questions are around equity. So I'm sorry, lost connection for a little bit. So I don't know, are we in that part of that conversation? And so I'm okay with now. Thank you everyone for your questions.
Chris?
Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is for the projects that West is going to be bringing forward in March. Do you have a ballpark or a range of what those might cost?
Yeah, do you have that, or is that just too far out at this point?
Yeah, I think it's a little far out. I certainly think we're north on the pool and the field house piece. We're without a doubt north of $10 million. On the parking piece, the kind of the industry standard right now is about $25,000 to $30,000 per parking spot of structured parking. And depending on the complexity of where we'd have to do it, whether we have to go down or up, you can kind of figure on, 100 parking spots is likely in the neighborhood of $3 million. So the additional courts and the additional pool, we're certainly north of $10 million, and would not be surprised if we saw something in the neighborhood of 20.
Thanks. And my second question is, were we to defer on the vote tonight and consider all the best projects as one package, how would that affect fundraising?
So the goal of separating the two was so that West High School could get moving on the fundraising attached to the atrium and the digital recording studio, versus waiting and moving them all into March, which would postpone their fundraising plan for a whole month. So the hope was they could kind of get started on that work versus being held back for a whole nother month. But we could not move those other projects forward until we had a tighter, budgetary amount to ask you for, and knew that they were physically feasible from an architect standpoint. So it seemed like dividing them was the best way to support West in their overall plan.
Chris, can you repeat your question one more time? It was echoing and I couldn't understand.
I'm not sure where that echo is coming from, but my question was if we were to defer the two items on the agenda for a vote tonight and consider all the West projects together, given the potentially very high cost of doing all of the projects, I think we could have a better conversation as a board about, like, if we can't invest in all these projects, which ones are we going to prioritize if we're looking at all of them at once? But I also wanted to know what the impact would be on West fundraising if we went that route.
Thank you.
I can address the fundraising. Obviously, the earlier we start, the better. We're already on a tight timetable, in many ways, a completely unrealistic timetable in terms of cultivating relationships and informing donors about what we're doing. That said, we have been working for the last month and a half at preparing for the campaign, and a lot of that work is continuing to go on. So that we are, ready to launch. We've begun, very casual conversations with alumni, as previously addressed, to just explore their interest and passion for this project. But it would be nice to get approval before we obviously put anything on the table. We've got a lot of documents to prepare, obviously collateral materials. That again, the sooner we get started, the better. We're also struggling at essentially asking people to make substantial contributions without a face-to-face. Thanks to COVID, this is going to be one of the most remarkable fundraising success stories in history if we can pull it off.
Great. Any other questions? Tia, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something as like a current West student. I wanted to add perspective from like my experience. So this won't benefit me, and I know that, but I just think it's so important for like future generations. And that's why I wanted to be a part of this team, because this is like a once in a lifetime kind of revolution. I guess not revolution, but yeah, kind of revolution, because I know my mom, she was a West High grad, and we have walked on the same floors with no renovations, the exact same thing. And as a current student now, one of the things that West students kind of jokingly brag about is, oh, we eat lunch on the hallway floors. What do you guys do? But imagine how cool it would be to actually say, oh, we get to eat lunch in a really cool atrium with comfy seating and all this fun stuff. Imagine being able to actually say we have a place to sit and eat lunch. That's something that, like, when I went into high school, I wouldn't think like, oh, I would be eating lunch on the floors. And it hasn't been that big of an issue yet. I think it would be really cool to actually be able to have a nice place to sit and eat lunch for those 50 minutes. In addition to the parking issue, I just like wanted to put myself into like the position of like staff and teachers at my school. Like in the Wisconsin winters, in those frigid weather, some staff have to park like blocks away and have to walk to school with their heavy backpacks and their heavy bags on the ice-filled sidewalks every day because there's not even enough parking for their own workplace. And I think that's like crazy to believe that that's an issue. And I don't think that should be an issue, because I think all staff should deserve to have parking if they can, because we know those Wisconsin winters are too long for comfort and they're just too much. And like, I feel bad for the staff that have to walk those blocks, and then they have to sometimes rearrange parking due to the parking tickets and parking police, which I think if you've ever parked in one of those spots at West that isn't in the parking lot, you know the parking police are on your tail. Also, I am an Avid, and we have a lot of guest speakers. And I know my teacher has struggled to get some guest speakers just due to the fact that parking isn't easily accessible to, and people don't want to come to West because it is such a hassle finding a place to park. Also, I want to finally add, I'm a Regent loud and proud. I'm happy to be a Regent, but I just would love to like support my school with more pride even than it has now. And those extra added athletic facilities would make it all the better, because we already have some we're like state level in so many athletics. So just think of how better we would be with those extra added resources in athletics. And my favorite part of West is the sense of community it has, and the fact that at any point in given time, there can be a basketball game going on in the Stevens Gym, and at the same time, a musical going on in the Performing Arts Center. But with that being said, there's so many opportunities and resources that we lack thereof, that I think if we were to have just even an additional design studio, an additional pool, it would just make West that much more accessible, and it would make the community aspect that much more better. And just for the future students, future regents, it would make it that much more like college isn't the only path in life that they can take, that maybe they can take a path in athletics that they would be able to discover with these newly designed programs, or with a new design studio. Maybe they'll find a passion in that because we have an added class at West. I think just developing these things that they find in high school leads them to like success in later in life. And I think we know that college isn't the only path that students take after high school. And so I think having the resources for like all different career paths is so important. And I think that's something that this project would add. And that's why I think all of these projects are so important. And it's hard to just pinpoint which one is more important than the others because they all are so drastically needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Julia?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Tia. Definitely agree. As a West student, it's very exciting to hear about all these changes. Just one thing, I think it can be easy to spot a school's big infrastructural problems, and it can be more difficult to find and address less obvious but equally under-resourced parts of the school, like, for example, lack of mental health staff or environmentally friendly building or extracurricular funding, any of that. So I was just wondering if there's been community input on those sort of non-infrastructure operational funding priorities, how those priorities would compare to current infrastructure projects, and if private fundraising is also a possibility for those, or if it's kind of an either or, and how those decisions were made.
Who wants to answer that?
Let me start. That's a great question, Julia. I think that what we're all recognizing on the West High Committee as we talk through names of potential donors, the projects that are needed, that we're trying to change the paradigm in terms of the private-public partnership. There's almost 3,000 foundations supporting public schools around the country. Most of them raise less than $50,000 a year for their whole community. We're really talking about, echoing the kind of charitable support for education that we see at private schools, that we see at universities. So the answer to your question is, I think we'll come back to our alumni. We may actually identify alumni who don't want to support facilities and capital projects, and we would come back to them and talk to them about priorities. I think it's a great opportunity, and I'll say this now as opposed to later. As an alum, and in the discussions I've had with alumni across the country, if not around the world, there's an irrational passion for two things. One, their high school and their elementary school, and I'll call it my junior high school, and also for the community of Madison. And I think that the success and prosperity of our town is really due in great measure to the quality of our public schools. And I think we reaching out to these alumni, they will support programmatic aspects. They will support scholarships as they have in the past. But space is important, and I think because we're supplementing the referendum, our focus at this point is on the physical facilities and for dovetailing with the projects that are going to be implemented.
Any other questions, thoughts? Melinda, thank you for being here too. I won't put you on the spot. So, all right, well, Christina?
Yeah, can I just ask Dan one more question? Is there a capacity issue with fundraising over such a short amount of time? I mean, again, bringing us back to the fact that because of the referendum projects, which we're trying to add on to, we're working on a very short timeline. September 6th is the deadline for having all of this done. Can you speak to that a little bit, just from a capacity standpoint?
Sure.
In our community.
From the start, I told the Memorial team and the West team that this was going to be a really hard campaign. I mean, there are two ifs in this. If the board approves this, then we can move forward. The second if is we can raise the money. And the question is, will we declare success if we raise 5 million instead of 10 or 15? I think the answer to that is yes. Melinda's on the call here. If we raise $5 million in a 6-month period of time to support Madison's public schools, I think we can call it declare success. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about this. This is a challenge. And as I've just said, and I'll say it again and again, there is irrational affection and passion for the schools. People will give for nostalgic reasons, but they're going to give more if they think they're creating the future. And that's what these campaigns are all about. And I know we're going to talk about equity in a minute, but this is not just about these two schools. It's about changing all of our aspirations for what alumni and what a broader community might do to invest in our schools. And you know, Madison is one of the few communities that is really looking at the magnitude of private support. You know, when I started in this business 35 years ago, the top 25 universities in the country in fundraising were all private. Now over half of them are public. We're sort of at that same sort of bridge that I think public universities were 30 years ago, with the same arguments: equity. Are we taking money away from other nonprofits and other philanthropic? And I think the margin of excellence we see in our public universities and soon to be in our public schools will be, I hope, in large part due to the engagement and philanthropic support of our alumni.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we are going to move into the equity conversation. I don't think, unless board members have a specific equity question for West High School visits here tonight. Okay, I think West High School, thank you all for coming and being here. Thank you so much, Tia, for your words.
Thank you.
And it's always nice to hear from our students, so thank you. All right, you guys have a lovely night, and we will continue the conversation around equity before we get into the motion. Okay, Nikki, I'll get to you in a minute. I'm sorry. And so I just want to start us off by just saying that I'm grateful to have a community who cares about our public schools. It is obvious tonight from listening to West High School, listening to our Lafollette parents who really invest and advocate to ensure that we do have equity throughout our school district. These are the type of public-private partnerships that we have been asking for years, right? We have been asking our community and our private donors and partners to come on board and invest in our schools. I do want to say and remind everyone that all of our schools are racially diverse. And I think tonight we're talking about when we're talking about equity, we're not just talking about racial equity, but we're also talking about economic equity. And all of our schools, as Tia said, need a lot of building improvements. And as we heard from our Lafollette parents, we need to adhere to our policy and our core values of equity. And so I just wanted to reinforce that before we start this discussion and urge our board members to consider this throughout our conversation here tonight. And so I'll open it up. Nikki?
Yes, a lot was brought up, and it was a very interesting discussion, reading the emails to the Lafollette parents, reading the information on West. I could tell you about the information on when Lafollette was built because I have my grandfather's notes on when he was named the first principal of the building. The goal of Lafollette was to create a hub for everyone, to be an inclusive environment, to include everyone, not just the few, but anyone and everyone who wanted to attend. Unfortunately, that dream hasn't completely come to reality due to economic challenges. In fact, having been to all 53 of our schools, I can honestly say that Lafollette has some of the more, Eastern Lafollette probably have some of the most structural difficulties if you have a physical disability to get around, because I've done it. And I can tell you I couldn't make it to class in the amount of time there, but this is an equity discussion, not a disability discussion. The issue is this: can we do outside fundraising? I'm all for outside fundraising. However, it must be, one, following our policy, because you can't change the rules in the middle of the game. The reason I accepted Memorials and why I may not accept West is this: Memorial is the only school that hasn't had, Memorial and Lafollette are the only two schools that haven't had major renovations since good 40 years. Those are the two. East had the theater and now the And now let me think, the basketball court. West is now getting some, and they needed a new pool because the air quality, I couldn't breathe and felt like I was having an asthma attack, and I don't even have asthma. It was that poor. But what it comes down to is this, and I don't want to ramble. We need people to create an equitable facility. That can't be done when you have one group that can get all the resources and another which has to fight for the scraps. It won't happen. Do we have to look at our equity policy? Absolutely, 110%. But we can't look at it now because, very simply, I'm not going to change the rules in the middle of the game, but it says make sure that one side doesn't have an unfair advantage. We told our taxpayers what we were going to build and what we were going to do. I'm not doing a massive design changes. I'm sorry, I just can't do that. What I can do is this. I want to see what Lafollette would like to do. I'd like to see a list of projects, frankly, and see what is and isn't doable, because they've never had their shot at seeing it. I've heard what Memorials wanted. I've now heard what West has wanted. And East right now has been relatively quiet, which is kind of odd, but I will deal with that and take that as the blessing that it is. I'll probably get 300 emails after that comment. However, Lafollette has the best ASL program, best sign language program that no one's ever heard of. Has art classes, but very few opportunities past the beginning level. Has math that are beginner levels, but don't have the higher advanced levels. Yet we expect our students to do well on a playing field that is not even. When the school was built, it was built with equity in mind, because the grandfather meant what he said, that he grew up poor on the south side of Chicago. He was educated for one reason. He was 6'6" and could play basketball, and was recruited on a college scholarship to play basketball at Carroll College. That's the only reason he got an education. He did a lot with it, but how many people aren't given those opportunities? We need to give those opportunities the best we can, and that can be done by not just saying, oh, we'll empty a few tits. No, I want to see what programs can be done to try and say, hey, this is our time to at least attempt to use our equity policy in the manner it's supposed to be used, which is to truly make our schools equitable, not just equal. Sorry for the soliloquy.
Thank you, Nikki, for that. I think you're spot on. I think, I would like to know what Lafollette wants, right? And then really go from there. I think, and that's a conversation that I think the board can have in the next operations work group meeting or another. I think we have to figure out a way in which we support in getting Lafollette what they need. I don't know, Dan, do you want another project? Just kidding. But we have to really, I think we have to, I don't see this as an either or, right? We have to support all of our schools to get us to a point. We haven't invested in our schools for years. And I think we have to, if it's going to take an additional support and help for Lafollette and East and other schools, to lift them up, to get us to a point of an equitable position, then we do that. And we have to find a path forward to do that. But I don't see this as an either or. And so I know, Ananda, you had something, and then Ali.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my thoughts straight, because even the fact that we divided the conversation, it raises a lot of concerns for me, because it's that the entire conversation is about the inequities that we have in Madison. It's not an equity conversation. We haven't begun to start talking about what is really equitable for schools. And then, of course, highlighting that we're talking about East and West as the entirety of our district, and forgetting that we have a large number of our students at the north side and at the south side, with a disproportionate number of elementary schools, disproportionate number of middle schools, and no high school in either of those parts of the city. So no, I don't think this is an equity conversation. What we're talking about is a competition of inequities. All the projects that are being put forward are projects that are needed in our schools. And there's no question about, we don't want any of our students, no matter where they live, to eat in the floor, or we don't want any of our students to not have amazing swimming pools or amazing spaces for learning, or we don't want any of our students or staff to experience disproportionate ways to park or having to worry about where they park when they go into school, where they park when they go into work. I mean, none of those things, none of those experiences that we have heard tonight and through the many emails we received are things that we want our students and our families and our staff to experience. I think our question is much deeper than just, are we supporting those projects or we're not supporting those projects? In this competition of inequities, we can get into this sort of locked mentality that, if a school end up having a better theater, then this other school will have like the worst theater, so that school needs to have a better theater. And schools having better than the other schools gets really complicated, in particular in a city where so many of our elementary schools are still rated not up to par in regards to what they should be for great learning in spaces. So I just wanted to illuminate the complexity of our conversations and the way we're framing them. I don't think that we're gonna get to an equity decision tonight in this project. I don't think that supporting West and Memorial are going to get into an equity. I don't think supporting or not supporting something is going to get to an equity decision. I appreciate Nikki's comment around, what is the energy around Lafollette in regards to projects that can support our students. What is the conversations at East High School to support our students? I mean, I think that's where my mind is at right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananda. Ali.
Thank you so much for speaking to that, Ananda. I think my first question around, kind of the long-term realities of equity and how it informs this project is, it is one thing to kind of fundraise around these projects, and really in consideration of the two projects that we're looking at tonight around West, that specific $7 million. So I guess, one, is it possible for us to increase what we're setting aside for Lafollette by $2 million so that we continue to evenly match the investment at Memorial and at West, dollar for dollar at Lafollette? And that would be a question I would ask Kelly. The second question would be, when you're looking at these projects, the initial cost would be covered by folks who are donating, but ultimately the district would be tasked with maintaining these projects, right? With, making sure that these facilities are up and running and investing in them in ways that, allow for them to continue to be high quality investments for our community. And so, again, I want to direct this question at Kelly, although I think it might be a question for Chad as well. How do we speak to kind of the additional maintenance that we will be investing in these projects in comparison to the needs of other schools? And also, can we make a similar commitment in terms of funding to Lafollette, and finding additional funding for Lafollette? Because one of the other things I don't want to do is I don't want to pit schools against each other and have this conversation of everybody gets the exact same thing. I heard really beautiful things come out of conversations with Wes about exactly what Wes needs, which is super specific to Wes. There's a lot of parking at a lot of the other schools. I worked at Wes after school and got ticketed so much that basically MSCR was paying the city of Madison for me to come do spoken word. At one point I was parking at the Best Western and using their shuttle to get to West, right? But when I heard Lafollette students talk, they weren't talking at all about parking, right? They were talking about what it would be like to have culinary arts opportunities, to have greater musical opportunities, to have greater enhancement in terms of theater. So it's not a kind of a tit for tat conversation. It really is a conversation about how do we invest in our schools and how do we leverage this enthusiastic moment for public education to benefit all of our children and all 4 of our high schools, which I think has really been the goal. So I hope that the conversation can still be excited for the West community in getting as much of their needs met as possible, and also really balancing that with, you know, what is sustainable for us as a district, and what is equitable for us across all schools. And Kelly, if you can kind of speak to those questions to the best of your ability, and then if there's other folks who want to chime in.
Yeah,
Sure.
just a second on Kelly, before you answer that, I just want us to make sure that we stay on the equity, sort of a very broad discussion around Lafollette. I don't want to get us into too much conversation because it's not on the agenda. And so I'm concerned about just not getting into that space. I don't know if we're getting, and so
I appreciate that, Gloria. I didn't think about that necessarily.
that was your first question, but like, I think the other questions are great.
Okay. So I think what I would say is if the board is interested in increasing any amount to Lafollette to kind of task us with that work, and we would bring back a proposal for you and post the meeting as appropriate to Gloria's comment. I think it's a good comment. As it relates to same thing for Lafollette. I think we would post that conversation. Certainly we are talking to them and getting all their feedback now. As it relates to the square footage, yeah, any amount of additional square footage will create additional costs, whether it's in custodial services and utilities. There are certainly, and Chad can chime in, but there are certainly kind of rules of thumb for square footage addition, right? So for every square foot you add, X amount of operation and generally is what you would want to budget. So Chad can jump in if you want that, or we can just follow up with you in writing, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, I guess I think following up in writing might give enhanced detail. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but I do think that that additional long-term expense is something that has to be factored in, because that, again, accumulatively becomes a greater investment in one school versus the other. And so I think it's something I'd like to have a greater sense of. Thank you for speaking to it, Kelly. And Gloria, thank you for your comments.
Sure, thank you, Ali. Anyone else? Nikki? Or I'm sorry, Nikki, you already went. Sorry, let's just, I saw your name, your hand up, and I didn't see anybody else's, but then Chris. Chris, go ahead.
I think both Chris's raised our hands. Should I just go, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Got it. So I really want to thank the Lafollette parents who wrote to us and came and spoke to us tonight. What I appreciated many things about your comments and your testimony. I think one thing I particularly appreciated was the framing of any school in the community and trying to make sure that we're serving our communities equitably, because we know that particularly our 4 comprehensive high schools are community resource centers. And I'm really trying to think about how we move forward on this in terms of not just schools and square feet and offerings within the school, but also the impact that any kinds of investment have on the community. I know that, we've said it before, we really want to encourage outside investment in our school district from all kinds of sources, whether it's private donors or companies or anybody who wants to support public education. And it's really hard to tell people, no, you can't, when we're trying to foster a culture of doing that. And at the same time, I completely appreciate the attention to opportunity gaps across the district. And I think as a board, we have to stay focused on opportunity gaps across the district. I would love to hear what Lafollette would like, and I would love to see us get that on the agenda. I would also love to have a conversation about how we might be able to do more for Lafollette, given that we just approved, I think, $13 million tentatively for Memorial to try to fundraise. We invested $11 million in West through private donations and prior referenda and other MMSD funding. The fact that West is potentially asking for $20 to $30 million of privately funded projects and Lafollette could get up to 5, but we're not really sure, does feel like we could be creating opportunity gaps down the road. And I think we need to have a conversation about what that means for Lafollette and what we're going to do to try to make sure that, even though not every school is going to have equal wants or needs, we want to make sure that things are equitable. The Lafollette letter that they sent us raised the question of doing some audits, which I thought were actually a pretty good idea. Specifically, they wanted to know, can we audit specialized facilities at our high schools? Can we audit courses offered and taught, particularly arts and AP classes, but I think they wanted to know all classes. They did want to know staffing levels, which I think that information is in the equity chart in our budget. I think it's important for us to realize that this conversation is about a lot more than buildings and the facilities inside those buildings. This is also about the opportunities that are offered our students every day in every building. And we know that not every class at every school is going to be the same, but I think we may have, I think we do have substantial inequities in course offerings between our high schools that I think we need to tackle and address. And we don't do it by saying, oh, we offer too many AP and advanced and arts courses at some of our schools. We have to say, how can we do more for the schools where we don't have as much going on? And I think we need to look at that and be honest about it. Let's see. I think that covers all of my comments. I really appreciate the framing, Ananda and Ali, that you guys put on this question, and I'd like to move forward with that. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Chris. So a couple things. I am going to put this on the agenda, a future agenda, so that we can talk about it. So we don't have to, we don't have to get into a lot of detail because it's going to be on a future agenda. And we can talk about all the emails and the questions and that Lafollette parents have posed to us via email and here today. I will be going to visit Lafollette parents, the Booster Club, that we have been invited to come and speak with them. And I do want to, myself and Ali, along with Dr. Jenkins, to meet with them and hear more so that we are prepared to come to a future board meeting when we really thoroughly talk about Lafollette. And so I think that we're all on board based on the conversation here tonight that Lafollette, we are going to prioritize and make sure that we get their voices and have a path forward. So, okay, Christina, did you have something? And then Ananda.
Yeah, thanks. And Savian too. What's that?
I had my hand raised.
Okay, so Christina, Savian, and then Ananda.
So just in regards to the equity questions that are being brought up and to the Lafollette community, I want them to know that we hear you as a board. I just want to share that I graduated from the Minneapolis Public Schools. And there is a north and south divide, just like we have described this east and west divide. I grew up in a working class neighborhood on the north side where it always felt like we were scrambling to get resources compared to other schools in the district. And so to me, when I hear this, it's more than just about the buildings. It's about knowing that we are going to invest in Lafollette. And that's sort of repeating what everybody else has already said, but going beyond just the physical building spaces and looking at the instructional opportunities and extracurricular opportunities and basically looking at what Lafollette needs. So I really do appreciate that we're going to put that on a future agenda so we can talk about it. You know, when I thought about it, it almost feels like the reaction is partially about, you know, having these projects move so fast at the other schools and maybe a community not even knowing that was possible, like that it was possible to do an extra project, that might even be a possibility and not even knowing what to ask. And so just making sure that we can help in ways that, you know, Lafollette would be interested in continuing that conversation. And knowing that I guess we want that to happen pretty quickly in case it also has to be on a short timeline in conjunction with the referendum projects at that school too. So I guess I would just keep timeline in mind too, just moving forward on that.
Thank you. And then Savion, Ananda, and then Nikki.
Yeah, guys. You know, this inequality of opportunity that's happened in Madison is unacceptable. It's not just East and West, it's all of our kids everywhere. You know, I looked at some of the numbers. I see East and Lafollette are at 30 to 40% free and reduced lunch. West Memorial are at 21 to 22%. So we're talking about geographical wealth here. And yes, all of our schools are diverse, but when we look at the numbers, we really got to ask ourselves, are we perpetuating more inequity here? Are we perpetuating the opportunity hoarding that we sometimes see? And yes, we absolutely need to embrace more public-private partnerships, but our private donors got to realize if you're donating to a democratic institution like public education, those funds need to be distributed in a democratic manner. Right. So I really recommend we look at our PTO fundraising policies as well, because as educational professionals, we know where the resource needs are. All right. And we just can't let, you know, the big fancy things dictate where we raise money for. No, you're donating to public education. Not, you know, that's not how our tax dollars work. And if we want to really embrace that, then we need to set some hard lines through our policies. And, you know, I totally understand why folks feel a little burned, because there's a reason why we set aside an equal amount of money for every high school that we'd rally support around, that all these people raise their taxes for. And now a few months later, we come and see this happening. So y'all, we really need to look at our PTO fundraising policies. We all see it. We know what happens. It's been going on for a while.
Okay. Thank you, Savion. Well taken. And I just want to remind us all that we all voted for memorial fundraising. And I think we all were at the table when we did have that conversation and voted. I agree, we have to look at the PTO policies. There are inequities that we all need to talk about. And it's going to be an opportunity for us to do that with regards to Lafollette when we place this on the agenda. Ananda, and then Nikki.
I waived mine.
Oh, you're done?
Yeah, I waived mine.
Okay, gotcha.
I just want to say how much I appreciate my board colleagues and how much I appreciate your comment specifically, Savion. I was typing in my comments and my questions when you really raised what I was going to say next, which is in a city designed and built under white supremacy values, where neighborhoods were created and created to promote whiteness and the perpetual invisibility of communities of color, having a conversation about what this school wants and what this other school wants as a means to achieve equity is too extremely limiting. And continue to put equity as a performance versus addressing the deeply rooted inequities in our schools. Because even though we're throwing this word around equity at Lafollette, we know that whatever we build at Lafollette or East and Memorial or West, our students of color are disproportionately going to continue to be impacted by whatever it is that we do, because we look at the numbers, we see the manifestations of inequities in our schools, and it's beyond the building conversations that Ian mentioned. So my recommendation is, instead of putting in the agenda item about Lafollette, and continue to sort of to promote this idea of like, oh, okay, when we have, so let's talk about Lafollette. And then East is going to say, well, Lafollette has an agenda item. Why don't East have an agenda item? And then Lappin is going to say, well, Lafollette East have an agenda item. Why, instead of just continue to put this patchwork around equity, my recommendation would be to put an agenda item around funding distributions across the school district. I'm sorry. I'm living with an 80-year-old aunt that turned the internet and now she's going to bed. I'm so sorry. She, putting an agenda item around conversation around fund distribution in our district. And to me, that feels that's going to really get to the root of some of the inequities that we have experienced forever in Madison. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, Ananda. I think we can do that. I think, I do want to be respectful of the comments from the parents at Lafollette and respond to their needs. And so I think this is a great opportunity for Ali and I and Dr. Jenkins to meet with them and then have this on the agenda. But I agree, Ananda. I think there has to be a broader conversation around, funding, equity, right? It's just, how do we do this, and so that we don't find ourselves in this position, right? In that it is at the core, and that we are planning ahead to ensure equity throughout our district. And so I agree. I was waiting for East High School to come up at some point too. So so Dan is going to be really busy, it seems like. Okay. So if there's nothing else, we will go ahead and I will read the motion and we can vote. I move that the Board of Education accept a project proposal from West High School. There are two motions here. Okay, so I'm going to read the first one, we'll vote, and then I'll read the second one. I move the Board of Education accept a project proposal from West High School to, 1, accept plans to add a new enclosed atrium space above and beyond the investments and commitments approved through the 2020 facility referendum proposal. 2, accept through a pre-approval of up to $5.5 million in donations to the Foundation of Madison's Public Schools no later than September 6, 2021. And 3, reconfirm the commitment, the commitment to set aside a minimum of $5 million from the future closure of tax incremental district proceeds for current referendum projects at Lafollette, Capitol High, and for the new elementary school to ensure alignment with the board's donation policy number 6177. The action is taken based on the understanding that West fundraising must meet the fundraising deadlines with cash in hand in order for the project to continue by the deadlines noted in the attached presentation materials for the regular meeting dated February 22nd, 2021. Can I get a second?
Ali Muldrow.
Ali Muldrow, second. Any further discussion? Chris?
So I would actually like to put a proposal on the table these two motions, not because I'm trying to kick the can down the road, but because West is potentially going to be coming forward with $20 to $30 million worth of proposals. And I feel like we can be more strategic as a board about if we're not going to fund that whole ask, where it's the most important to fund these asks if we see all the proposals at once. And I personally, I'm not saying we're not going to fund anything, but I just feel like if we fund what we want to fund tonight and then they come forward with another, $20 million of proposals, it's harder to swallow that whole 20 million. And maybe those 20 million would actually feel more exciting, or the community would be more energized around those proposals. So I feel like with this one in particular, because the asks from one school are going to be so high, I would prefer to see all of them at once and make a decision at that time.
Okay, so are you making a motion?
I guess I'm throwing a motion out to table both of these until next month.
Okay.
I would second that motion, and I am not completely confident we're following our own policy. And so I would want that discussion about PTO donations and things of that nature discussed prior to as well.
Okay, so we got a second. I just read one motion, so we're going to set that aside. Motion here, we got a second. Savion, any further discussion on this? I'm concerned about waiting just because we got, we have people who need to get it to work to fundraise, and for all the reasons they explained to us during this board meeting. Ali?
Yeah, I understand the desire to look at all of the projects together. I think we have paid specific attention to these two projects that I do feel like fall within the realm of achievable, and are less dependent on the city's approval, and could get a head start. I also think inconsistency with the decisions we made around Memorial last month, that I have a few concerns. And then I also just have to say that I think, when we phrase it, what we're funding or what we're investing in, I think we're talking about public resources. And we continue to go to taxpayers and ask them to invest more and show up. And now folks are really enthusiastically campaigning to further, capitalize on the investments we've already created. I think it would be complicated, I guess, to turn down substantial donations only to wind up in a position where we go to referendum to achieve the same sorts of things, except for instead of utilizing the donor base and additional strategy, we're utilizing taxpayers. And so I guess I have concerns all around, and I think the conversation about equity is a pressing and important conversation. And I think that, I guess I think that it's complicated either way we move forward at this point. But I have some concerns about what it looks like to halt at this point.
Okay. Ananda and then Nikki.
Yeah, thank you, Ali, for bringing that up. I share some sentiments that Chris and David have brought up. I also find it to be really complicated, specifically where we are now, in the middle of potential financial crisis, both on our state level and here locally, and continue to unearth so many inequities that are continue to have attention and that have a really extensive dollar amounts that we're saying no to funding. And again, like I said, I don't think at this point what we're voting on is accepting a plan. We're not. I think there's a lot more conversations around equities or inequities, however people wanted to frame, around the distribution of funding and whatnot. But I do have concerns about us saying no to community funding when this was exactly one of the reasons why people that were opposed to opposed of referendum were asking us to do instead of the referendum. So I find that to be also complicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananda. Nikki?
I appreciate everyone's comments. I think they're well thought out. In this particular situation, I understand time being of the essence, and that makes a lot of sense. Therefore, I think we should vote tonight, because I think whatever happens, we need to get started. I also want to clarify one thing, and I know Ananda may have misspoke, but Lafollette wasn't created to cater to whiteness, and that one I will object to no matter what. I understand that society has made it that way, and Madison made it that way. That is Madison's fault, and Madison takes that blame and deserves that, and the community as a whole deserves it, but the school's idea was not created that way. Sorry, just my own.
Thank you, Nikki. Okay, let's go for a vote. We got a motion at the table. On the table, we got Savion second. Although, Julia, your advisory vote to delay.
Nay.
Nay. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion fails. Okay, I'm going to read motion 1 again. I move that the Board of Education accept a project proposal from West High School to 1, accept plans to add a new enclosed atrium space above and beyond the investments and commitments approved through 2020 facility referendum proposal. 2, accept through pre-approval of up to 5.5 million donations through the foundations of Madison Public Schools no later than September 6, 2021. And 3, reconfirm the commitment to set aside a minimum of 5 million from the future closure of tax incremental district proceeds for current referendum projects at Lafollette, Capitol High, and our new elementary school to ensure alignment with the board's donation policy number 6177. This action is taken based on the understanding that West fundraising must meet the fundraising deadlines with cash in hand in order for the project to continue by the deadlines noted in the attached presentation materials for the regular meeting dated February 22nd, 2021.
Second, Nikki
Nikki,
Vandermeulen with one comment, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
And that is, I understand Wes' plea. I respect it, and I think it's quite solid. Here's the reason why I'm voting against it. Because we can't change the rules in the middle of the game. We have a fundraising policy and we aren't following it. We have an equity policy, which we never tend to follow, and which is frustrating in its own right. And therefore, based on those reasons, I can't, but I respect them for doing it.
Great, thank you. Julia, your advisory vote?
Can I make a comment as well?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so we voted just a couple weeks ago to help out Memorial. They already have a theater. This time West is asking for things that other schools already have. And frankly, it's not equal to have everyone make a sacrifice to raise their taxes and then reject private funding. So this isn't necessarily, I think, where I would choose to put funds, but I think that in this case, West needs it and it's kind of urgent. So I'll be putting yes.
Okay. Julia, your advisory vote, aye? Okay.
Aye.
Okay, all those in favor, aye? Raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, Nikki, Savion, you're not voting?
I'm abstaining.
Okay. So you got
Is that 6-1 with Sabian abstaining?
Yep. Okay, motion 2. I move that the Board of Education accept a project proposal from West High School to 1, accept plans to add a new digital design studio space above and beyond the investments and commitments approved through the 2020 facility referendum proposal. 2, accept through pre-approval of up to $1.5 million in donations to the Foundation for Madison Public Schools no later than September 6, 2021. And number 3, reconfirm the commitment to set aside a minimum of $5 million from the future closure of tax incremental district proceeds for current referendum projects at Lafollette, Capitol High, and/or the new elementary school to ensure alignment with the board's donation policy number 6177. This action is taken based on the understanding that West fundraising must meet the fundraising deadline with cash in hand in order for the project to continue by the deadlines noted in the attached presentation materials for the regular meeting dated February 22nd, 2021. Can I get a second? Ali Muldrow, second. Okay. All those in, Julia, your advisory vote? Aye. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, and Savion abstained? Okay, so 6-1 and Savion abstained. Okay, thank you all for that very robust conversation. It was good, and like I said, we will be meeting with Lafollette soon. So now we move on to the consent agenda. And I move that the Board of Education adopt and approve all of the motions set forth in section 10 of the electronic agenda prepared for the February 22nd, 2021 regular school board meeting, exactly as said motions are written. By voting affirmatively on this motion, a board member expresses his or her affirmative vote on each of the motions consolidated hereby subject to any express separations that have been made by any member of the school board. Can I get a second? Ali, second. Okay, any separations? Chris?
I'd like to separate 10.5 and 10.6.
10.5, 10.6. Any other separations? Okay. All right, we will separate 10.5 and 10.6. All those in favor of approving the other consent agenda items besides 10.5 and 10.6? Can I get a second? Or did I say that wrong? I move that we approve all items on the consent agenda except 10.5 and 10.6. Can I get a second?
We just need the vote. We just need the vote. You already
Yeah.
have the motion on the table. It's good.
All those in favor, aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion I'm sorry, Julia, your advisory vote. Aye. Okay, motion passes 7-0. All right, 10.5, Chris Crucy, it's all yours.
Yeah, I want to thank Michelle for her work on this. It's really great to see how this program is materializing and gelling and getting stronger every year. I was just wondering if, Michelle, you could give us like one sentence about each of the programs we're funding, just because I'm excited to hear what they are.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Yes, so in the bigger picture, what you see in the consent agenda tonight are just the organizations that need board approval, but there are a total of 8 organizations that are moving forward with implementation. So one of the organizations is Mount Zion Baptist Church. They will be serving elementary students living in South Madison, providing academic support. We believe the outcomes from that work that they will be doing after school on asynchronous days and throughout the summer will definitely help students complete assignments, help with their overall attendance and engagement, and provide more just academic confidence. One of the other projects that we are moving forward with is the Carter G. Woodson Scholarship and Community Service Foundation. They are have a service focus on our middle school boys. They provide mentoring, they provide academic support during after school, and they are going to do community service with the young men through mentoring and other out of more like community-based programming. And we believe that program will also help the young men involved with academic support and advocacy, increasing their self-confidence and really feeling the support of caring adults. Another program that we are moving forward with is MADAM. And MADAM is focused on middle school girls, specifically learning how to code, exploring the possibilities of technology. They'll be developing their own projects, and they will also be exposed to Black professionals in the STEM fields. All right, we have also CEOs of Tomorrow, who will be focusing on a cohort of our high school students. Those high school students will be learning entrepreneurial skills by learning the design thinking process. And then the students also engage middle school students in the development of a business in a box kit. And then those students will also be working with our experiential learning team to earn independent study credit. Dane County Time Bank is another organization that we're moving forward with. They will be working with high school students and community members doing advanced training in restorative justice. The students will be trained to become Justice League ambassadors, and then they will engage their peers in other ways to do restorative justice. And they're also looking to do a couple of youth forums across our district. We believe the outcomes of that program will really help potentially reduce behavior referrals, increase student engagement and overall well-being. And then we also have Dear Diary, which is their fiscal agent organization is the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute. That program is working with middle and high school girls, looking specifically for referrals from young women who have had interactions in the court system, sometimes in our Office of Opportunity Youth, and will be doing 8th to 9th grade transition, mentoring, and some other mentoring and support. We also have Urban Triage, who is one of the organizations with an explicit focus on working with families, really helping to help families, parents develop coping skills, developing personally as parents, and really thinking about how they're going to improve the interpersonal relationships within their family, as well as how they engage with schools. And then lastly, we have the MAD Local Food Group, also known as Pasture and Plenty. They are one of the organizations we worked with last year, just did amazing programming of getting locally farmed ingredients into the hands of young people in their homes. They do virtual cooking with chefs of color and do recipes. And we believe that that is a really nice holistic program on healthy choices and overall well-being.
Thank you, Nichelle.
Yes, thank you.
There were two, I don't know if I'm missing it here, but there's two programs that you mentioned that are not on our, did I miss it? Did you catch that, Chris?
I didn't, but I wasn't watching the list while she spoke, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so Gloria, if I can just provide a little bit of context. So for tonight's consent memo, only the organizations that needed approval because of their fiscal year contract being at $35,000 or more are on the consent. But there is a total of 8 organizations, and I will provide the details that I just shared verbally in a weekly update so that you can see the total list of programs.
Great. Thank you so much, Nichelle.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, did you have any other? No. Okay, Christina, and then Ali.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. That helps clarify because I was a little confused too as to how all of the funds were fitting together, because the estimate that's in number 6 of the memo totals up more than what we're approving tonight. And so I'm assuming that the ones that don't go over what needs approval makes up for that difference. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I apologize for any confusion. I was really struggling with like how to write the memo so that the things that needed your approval were clear, but then also letting you know all of the other amazing work that is moving forward. So my apologies for any confusion, and hopefully it's clear a little bit.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I actually appreciated seeing that rubric that was included in the memo to see all of those organizations and to also understand a little bit more about the process that you went through to evaluate the proposals that you received. Here's just one question. Do you have an estimate, I mean, given all these great projects and organizations we're working with, like an estimate of the number of students that might be served with all of these projects? It may be too soon for you to tell, but.
So I do have an estimate from their original proposals. I'd like to actually come back to you in an update with a final number. And the reason I would like to do that is many of the proposals were very strong, but due to our funding limitations, we couldn't fund everybody at their full proposal amount. So as we move forward now into actually developing the contracts and the outcomes, I want to be able to, refine that with them and make sure that based on what they were awarded, where they think they can land on the numbers of students and families they will serve.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ali?
Thank you so much, Board Member Carusi, for pulling Black excellence to the forefront of the conversation and starting us out with just the breakdown of each of the programs. Nichelle, one of the things that made me incredibly excited about this was to see that these were 2-year commitments, that we were really building in sustainability and kind of long-term partnership, and also to see that there was a really strong outpouring from our community of folks who want to partner with us to do this work and want to use this support to enhance the experiences of our students, both in school and beyond school. I want to thank everybody who applied to support us in doing this work and pursuing Black excellence. And I want to congratulate the folks who have been awarded. There were a series of proposals that really stood out to me, but I also want to acknowledge Urban Triage and the work of Pernicia and the group that's bringing food to our students. for, you know, getting us started that first year when it was really hard to get started right as the pandemic happened, but also for building in from that space work that sustained not only that year, but this year onto the next. So giving us that first 3 years of this work and sticking with us through kind of the ups and the downs of this most recent, you know, cycle of reality. Nichelle, I don't think any of us could thank you enough. This has been a severely intense effort. I don't think anybody could have had a harder first year go at it than Black Excellence had last year, and you took it and ran with it and made the best out of it, and continued to deliver services to young people, even in the face of kind of uncertainty and definitely a lot of complexity. So thank you for continuing to champion this work and all that it means to our communities. I am so excited to get to vote in support of these projects and in support of the work you're doing with Black Excellence.
Yes. Thank you, Ollie. It's great. Thank you, Nichelle, so much. Anybody else have any? Yeah, these organizations are a great list of organizations. Dear Diary, amazing work with our young Black females in our schools, Urban Triage, Time Bank. I mean, just amazing group of organizations, sorry. All right, I will read the motion. I move that the Board of Education, in response to request for proposal number 4078, approve the following expenditure for fiscal year 2021. $39,715 to Urban Triage, $36,000 to Dane County Time Bank, $55,900 to Dear Diary via the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute, and for the fiscal year of 2022, $36,000 for Matum Inc., $60,000 to Dane County Time Bank, and $51,703 to Dear Diary via the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute. Can I get a second? Ananda, second? Ananda, second. Any further discussion? Okay, Julia, your advisory vote?
Aye.
Aye. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next item, 10.6.
So this is funding pathways primarily through the ConnectEd grant with the Joyce Foundation, and also with $23,000 of local funding. And Kelly, I just wondered, is that $23,000 of local funding a required match on the grant, or is it just money we're putting forward to supplement the grant money?
If Cindy's on, she can jump in. I believe it's money we're putting forward, not required matching.
Thanks. So as I've said many times, I have concerns that we haven't seen data on pathways that shows that we're getting the results we want to see from this investment. There's a lot of good in pathways, you know, particularly when it comes to the relationship building, providing student services, trying to commit to smaller class sizes of 25 students at the high school level. But if you look at the gender data on our two pathways, it's perpetuating gender inequities along stereotypes you would expect, with a lot more girls in health sciences and a lot more boys headed into the IT pathway, which leads to more lucrative careers. There's the loss of opportunity for students in pathways to take other classes that they might want to take, like arts and world languages. And the need to allocate more positions into pathways is taking away opportunities at the 11th and 12th grade levels for things like AP classes at some of our schools. For that reason, I have a really hard time supporting this. I think the $23,000 of local funding would be better invested in developmental designs or in additional letters training for our staff. So I will leave it at that.
Okay, great. Any other further discussion? All right, Julia, your advisory vote. I'm sorry, Julia, did you, you're looking at me like I'm.
I would like to, is there a way we can hear a little bit more about that? I think that was pretty quick.
Also, I think, Gloria, we have to read the motion before we vote on it, so.
Oh yeah, sorry. Sorry, Julia, you want to have.
Well, just if Chris could maybe speak a little bit more about her concerns with it, I'd be interested in if anyone else could respond to those.
Did you want more details about a specific concern, or?
I guess, is there anyone else that disagrees with those, or it seems like there should be discussion about that.
May I answer?
Nikki, go ahead.
Yes, Julia, I share the same concerns as Chris. I worry about that. I also worry on pathways, whether or not on the disability component, whether or not that's inclusive enough. I've always been a little critical of the Joyce Foundation, and I do worry about it. So if you're asking, do I agree with it? No, I don't. Am I going to vote for it? No. But that's my personal view. That's not the board's view. I don't speak for anyone but me.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia, for pointing that out. I was moving faster than I wanted to. So Lisa, did you're on? Do you want to respond to that?
Sure, I can add a little information, Gloria. I know that when the team put together the consent memo, and as you read through it, it's about reimagining pathways. I think that the path that we have taken to implement thus far, we've created some of our own actually technical difficulties and programming difficulties because of the pace that we've been using across the schools. So this amount of money gives us an opportunity to reimagine, learn from the lessons that we have experienced over the last couple of years, and hear the voices of our students and staff again to decide when we're moving forward and how that will look in all of our high schools. So they really take this year to think about and do the professional development with the Great Lakes folks to really learn from the lessons and then take the next steps moving forward at our comprehensive high schools.
Thank you, Lisa. Ali?
Yeah, I want to thank Julia for talking to how we have a more expansive conversation around pathways. I think pathways has been in its infancy and hasn't necessarily had the greatest start, just given some of what has hindered pathways in the last year and a half. Sorry about that, y'all. But what I do think is that it's a complicated situation because we're looking at the first class of students who will graduate from pathways, and their senior year and their junior year were really compromised by the realities of COVID and the pandemic. That being said, what I've heard from students who have been involved in pathways over the course of 4 years has been really mixed. And so for some students, it's been a clear channel to academic success and achievement beyond school. And for other young people, the fact that it was in its infancy provided a series of barriers that I would hope we would work beyond. And so I think it's a complex conversation about whether or not we let go of something that isn't working as well as we'd like it to work, and lose some of the benefits that we've developed over the course of investing in it, or whether or not we want to iron out the things that we know are problems with pathways. And I think that that's a conversation we need to have transparently and clearly, and I appreciate that we're taking the time to do it.
Great, thank you, Ali. Dr. Jenkins? I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thank you too so much, Ali, because she actually went in a direction that I was going to go in terms of just the emphasis of it and just looking at the program coming in. First of all, just knowing quite a bit about pathways. And as we talk about giving our students a plethora of opportunities, it can too do that. But I think how we started it off and then running right into COVID, it's just not really even appropriate to totally judge it right now. But I think Lisa spoke to the fact that the additional dollars give us an opportunity to explore. When we come out of COVID-19, we're gonna have to come out on all cylinders. And I think this opportunity to have professional development around it, so how we can build other opportunities other than just the traditional pathways for our students to not only just graduate, but think about post-secondary opportunities. This would be just the seed money, because to do pathways, there is a larger commitment. And I think this keeps us engaged with our community in ways that could help create a brighter future. So I would just definitely say, consider all of that and not be as judgmental on the past year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's just so much potential in pathways. I mean, we've learned a lot, and I think this is an opportunity to really to figure out how we make this and make improvements. And we've had a lot of community partners who invested in this. And I just want to call out Madison College and so many other partners who really have invested in pathways and become partners because of our direction and commitment to this. And I'm always about trying to really think outside the box, be innovative, offer many opportunities as we can for our students in many different ways. This is just another way to do it. Understanding that we still have a lot of work to do, but I'm confident and hoping that we can work out those glitches and moving us forward. Chris, and then we'll vote.
So I really appreciate the comments that everybody made. I'll reiterate that there is a lot of good in pathways that we don't want to lose. And I remain concerned that we're talking about reimagining pathways, which I think is a good thing to do. But we're talking about doing that by continuing to work with the same consultant that got us to the place where we are right now. So I'm just not sure how much reimagination can actually happen in that situation. So
great. Thank you, Chris. All right. I move that the Board of Education approve an expenditure in the amount of $80,000 payable to Connect Ed for professional development for the 2020-21 school year up through June 30th, 2021. From the Pathways local budget, $23,000 and Joyce grant funds, $57,000. Can I get a second?
Second, Ali Muldrow.
Ali Muldrow, second. Julia, your advisory vote?
If I can, I'd like to abstain.
Sure. Okay. Julia abstains. All those in favor, aye. Show of hands. Any opposed? Okay. We got 3-2.
I'm abstaining also.
And Christine, I'm sorry, 4-2. And Christine abstained.
Thank you. Thank you, Gloria.
And then now other reports to the board, City of Madison Education Committee. That's you, Ananda.
Thank you, President Reyes. I shared last month that we had a rich conversation around what was going to be the topic the Education Committee was going to tackle. And we have decided to move forward with really understand and try to figured out what is a collaborative approach, city, county, and school district around the inequities of Wi-Fi accessibility and barriers for many of our families in our district. We have received or viewed presentations from different folks and with a sharp vision around inequities, and I'll make sure to forward that to all of you, those presentations in that data form. We are going to continue to figure out ways to find recommendations around those, and those recommendations may be at the micro level, around what does it look like to really get access for our families, all the way to a macro level around policy and policy recommendations and advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananda. Student Senate.
Yeah, we have a couple of exciting things. I know our civics committee is working with the social studies department to learn how we can incorporate local political engagement and awareness into our social studies curriculums, and they've been doing a lot of work with that recently. And then also, we would like to thank Dr. Jenkins for joining us to answer students' questions at a live event this Friday that Student Senate put together, so that students can learn and ask questions about reopening and athletics. Just trying to increase transparency there. So thank you very much. That's what we've been working on. We have another meeting tomorrow. Going well.
Great. Thank you, Julia, for that update. And then MSCR.
MSCR has decided that it is waiting till we are in person to meet again. And the main reason being that we have about 2 or 3 people that show up at the virtual meetings and no one else. Therefore, they asked Barb permission. They also asked me as well and sent it to Dr. Jenkins if they could continue when people are in person.
Great, thank you. Next is the dissolution of the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee. I move that the Board of Education dissolve the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee effective February 22nd, 2021. Can I get a second? Nikki?
Second.
Nikki, second. Any further discussion? Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, aye. Any opposed? I'm sorry, Julia, your advisory vote.
Also aye.
Aye, okay. Approved 7-0.
Thank you.
And then we got, yes, and then we got another for the Falk Elementary School. I move that the Board of Education dissolve the Citizens Ad Hoc Committee relative to renaming Falk Elementary School effective February 22nd, 2021. Nikki, second. Okay, all those in favor? Julia, your advisory vote. I was doing so good. All those in favor, aye. Okay. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Next, we have Hamilton Middle School Library Media Center renaming proposal. I move that in accordance with Board Policy 6071, the Board of Education rename the Hamilton Middle School LMC the Jill A. Girth Library Media Center. Can I get a second? Ali, second. Any discussion? Chris?
This is a really exciting proposal, and I want to thank the Hamilton community for bringing it forward. I love honoring librarians. This is wonderful. I just have a small correction. It's policy 6701. There's a typo in the motion. So.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
So I didn't read it wrong. I just, yeah, it was, okay.
I'll make that correction. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything, anybody else? Questions? You see Alex is here to answer any questions. You want to say a few words while you're
here? Sorry, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for considering it. It's been a long road. It was a hard thing to deal with, and it just came so naturally when people would talk about Jill to find a way to honor her in the place that she was loved so much. So it really means a lot to a lot of people that you're considering this. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anything, anybody else? All right, all those in, Julia, your advisory vote.
Aye.
All those in favor? Aye, show of hands. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Alex, for being here. Next is the detachment of certain property from DeForest Area School District and attachment to MMSD. I move that the Board of Education accept the attachment of a parcel of land from the DeForest Area School District as described in the materials prepared for the February 22nd, 2021 regular Board of Education meeting. I further move that upon the attachment of this parcel detached from the DeForest Area School District and attached to the MMSD, this parcel will be assigned to Gompers Elementary School as part of Gompers attendance area boundaries as described in the materials prepared for the February 22nd, 2021 regular BOE meeting. Can I get a second?
Second, Ali Muldrow.
Second, Ali. Julia, your any discussion? Okay, Julia, your advisory vote?
Aye.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
We already did.
That's it.
And that's it. Can I get a motion I move to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a second?
Second.
Ali, second. Okay. Julia, your advisory vote.
Aye.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned 7-0. Thank you. Have a good night,
Thank
y'all.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Gloria.
Yes. Thank you. Oh, I thought somebody was saying my name. Hi, Dr. Jenkins. You're still